Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Nicole Brown Simpson. Nicole Brown Simpson was born in Frankfurt, Germany, in 1959 and had an older sister named Denise. Looking for a fresh start, Nicole's family moved to the United States, settling in Garden Grove, California. She was later joined by two younger sisters, Dominique and Tanya. Nicole quickly adapted to life in America. With her blonde hair and gentle personality, she won the hearts of those around her. In 1977, an important meeting took place at a prestigious club in Beverly Hills, where Nicole worked as a waitress. She met Orenthal James Simpson, a football star at the height of his fame, who was also involved in acting and advertising. Orenthal was married to Marguerite and had 3 children, but a relationship formed between Nicole and Orenthal. The 12-year age gap did not seem to be a problem for them. However, tragedy struck when Orenthal's son drowned in a swimming pool accident, which deeply affected the family and strained their relationship. Orenthal and Marguerite then divorced, and he began dating Nicole officially. In 1985, Nicole married Orenthal in a lavish mansion located in the upscale Brentwood neighborhood of Los Angeles. After the marriage, she adopted her husband's last name and became known as Nicole Brown Simpson. However, her life changed dramatically during their marriage. The couple had 2 children, Sydney, born in 1985, and Justin, born in 1987. Nicole was a devoted mother who chose to care for her children herself, engaging in activities with them and planning family vacations. Besides taking care of her children, she started a small interior decoration business. Although it seemed like they had a perfect family life, this idyllic situation was not meant to last. Orenthal repeatedly cheated on his wife and treated her badly. The first warning sign of his abusive behavior was when he took a children's baseball bat and smashed a Mercedes. Although the incident was recorded, Nicole chose not to press charges. His lack of consequences only made his behavior worse, leading to increased violence. Friends reported bruises on Nicole, and Orenthal threatened to kill her. She called the police several times during his attacks. Orenthal admitted to mistreating Nicole and admitted to hitting her, but he claimed that both parties were at fault. The judge ordered Orenthal to complete 12 hours of community service and pay a $200 fine. The couple continued to argue, and after 7 years of marriage, Nicole filed for divorce in 1990. Nicole occasionally contacted Orenthal and attempted to reconcile with him, partly due to pressure from her parents, whose business relied heavily on Orenthal's support. These efforts were unsuccessful, however. Nicole and her children moved into a rented house in Brentwood. After the divorce, Nicole received a $430,000 settlement and $10,000 in monthly child support. In December 1992, while skiing in Aspen, Colorado, Nicole met Cato Kalin. They became close friends, and Cato moved into a guest house on Nicole's property for a year. He paid rent and helped care for her kids. Despite getting a restraining order against Orenthal for stalking, Nicole felt paranoid, believing she saw him everywhere. In January 1994, for safety reasons, Nicole and her children moved to a different 3-story rental house in the same area. Cato also relocated with them, renting a guest house in her yard. Slowly, life started to get better, and Nicole had big plans for the future. Just before the tragic events, Nicole met and began talking to Ronald Goldman. That day, she attended a dance concert for her daughter. Her ex-husband Orenthal was also present. After the concert, around 6 p.m., Nicole and her children went to their favorite restaurant for dinner, where they met Ronald. They chatted for a while, and then Nicole returned home to her children. Nicole accidentally left her glasses at a restaurant, and Ronald found them. He decided to bring them to her at her home in Los Angeles. However, This meeting led to a tragic situation. At 10:45 p.m., Cato, Nicole's neighbor, heard unusual noises from her house and went outside to investigate. He noticed Nicole's dog acting strangely and upon closer inspection saw blood and bodies, prompting him to call 911. When police arrived, they discovered a horrific scene. Nicole and Ronald's bodies were found dead. Nicole had been stabbed multiple times. An autopsy revealed that she had been stabbed 7 times in the neck and head, along with a deep cut to her throat. Due to Orenthal's history of abusing Nicole during their marriage and his recent stalking, he quickly became the prime suspect in the double murder. Police began investigating the case, and a witness came forward. The limousine driver reported that he had taken the soccer star Orenthal to the Los Angeles airport, where he caught a flight to Chicago, arriving at 5:30 a.m. Later, airline employees were interviewed, including a flight attendant who mentioned that Orenthal kept his hands in his gym bag throughout the flight, implying that he was trying to hide something. Later, Orenthal checked into the Orr Plaza Hotel at 6:15 a.m. and received the keys for room 915. Approximately 30 minutes later, a man at a gas station told police he saw someone resembling Orenthal digging in the woods near the hotel. Los Angeles police contacted Orenthal and asked him to come back for questioning, and he agreed. While in his hotel room, he made 10 phone calls, including one to a woman named Katie, as well as calls to airlines and a car rental service. He purchased tickets for a flight back to Los Angeles and requested a car to take him to the airport. The reason for his call to Katie is still unclear. Later, Orenthal contacted the LAPD at 8:21 a.m. to inform them that he would be returning soon. A hotel employee noted that at 8:30 a.m., Orenthal went to the lobby, visibly upset that his car had not yet arrived, as he was in a hurry to reach the airport. In a fit of rage, he slammed his hand into a wall, causing it to bleed. He then asked a hotel employee to bandage his hand. A car finally arrived 5 minutes later, and Orenthal was taken to the airport, where he boarded a 9:15 a.m. flight back to Los Angeles. Police flew to Chicago after receiving a tip from an eyewitness. With the support of local police, they searched the wooded area near the hotel using metal detectors, anticipating that Orenthal had concealed the murder weapon, a knife, there. However, their search was unsuccessful. They also searched the hotel room and found bloody sheets, broken glass, and a torn piece of paper with a person's name on it. They also collected fingerprints and blood found on the bathroom floor. After Orenthal returned to Los Angeles, he arrived at the murder scene at 11:00 a.m. Orenthal was then arrested and taken to the police station. He was offered a lie detector test, but he refused. This raised further suspicion. Orenthal pleaded not guilty, but Nicole's family believed that he was responsible for her and Ronald's deaths. However, there was no evidence against him at the time, so he was released. Orenthal seized the opportunity and escaped in his white car. Police from Fort Bronca then began a pursuit, and all nearby patrol cars joined in the pursuit. Police chased Orenthal's white Ford along the highway. Several camera-equipped helicopters followed the car, along with patrol cars. After traveling 100 kilometers, police stopped the Ford and arrested Orenthal, who became the prime suspect in a double murder case. During the investigation, a friend of Nicole's reported that Orenthal had said he would kill Nicole if he caught her. At the time of her murder, Nicole was in her yard with Ronald, which may have sparked jealousy and violent behavior from Orenthal, who had a history of violence. Family members have mentioned that Orenthal had mental health issues. He suffered from migraines and sometimes talked to himself when he forgot to take his medication. A lengthy and complicated trial ensued, attracting national attention. The prosecution portrayed Orenthal as a man whose jealousy had spiraled out of control, leading him to commit the murder. The prosecution presented evidence of Orenthal's guilt, including a bloody shoe print of a size 10, matching the size he wore, found at the crime scene. In addition, to the left of these prints, drops of blood were found. A bloody glove and a knitted hat, possibly belonging to the perpetrator, were also discovered. Hours after the murder, police observed multiple cuts on Orenthal's left hand. These injuries were linked to the blood found at the scene. Blood was also found in Orenthal's car, and analysis confirmed that the blood at the crime scene matched his blood type. From the beginning, Orenthal and his legal team worked hard to prove his innocence. The defense pointed to flaws in the police investigation. They argued that the crime scene was handled by inexperienced forensic scientists, and that the crime scene was not properly secured, which could have led to evidence contamination. They argued that the evidence presented was unreliable. By rigorously cross-examining the prosecution's witnesses, the defense sought to undermine their credibility. Although the witnesses gave explanations for each issue, the jury still doubted the reliability of some of the evidence. The prosecution argued that he killed Nicole and Ronald out of jealousy. Reports of domestic violence were revealed. However, the defense claimed that Orenthal was the victim of a racist police frame-up. This defense strategy resonated with many African Americans who had experienced injustice and discrimination in the legal system. The idea that dark skin was a significant factor in police bias gained traction, leading to significant public support for Orenthal. Meanwhile, many white Americans continued to believe that he was guilty. Orenthal stated that he represented not only his own interests, but also the interests of all Americans. He was extremely popular in the 1960s, a time when Black Americans were starting to protest against oppression. Orenthal was pivotal in highlighting racial inequalities in the U.S. Throughout this effort, several corrupt officials within the upper levels of power, especially from the Los Angeles Police Department, were uncovered. However, there is still much debate about Orenthal's guilt in the murder case. It is suspected that the issue of racial discrimination was deliberately introduced to mislead the jury. Meanwhile, the prosecution firmly argued that Orenthal was the culprit. They presented evidence collected at the crime scene. After examining Orenthal's pool, prosecutors presented evidence of his abusive relationship with Nicole. However, Orenthal denied these allegations during his trial, and surprisingly, the jury appeared to ignore them. The prosecution also highlighted his attempts to evade justice. In response, the defense argued that he feared for his life because of the racist attitudes of the Los Angeles police, claiming that he was worried about being shot before he could explain his story. The prosecutor said, "Just before her death, Nicole confided to a friend that she feared for her life and well-being because Orenthal sometimes lost control. He was described as jealous." Nicole's diary contained relevant entries that the prosecutor's office used throughout the trial. One of the main pieces of evidence that pointed to Orenthal's guilt was a bloody glove found at the crime scene. A similar glove was later found by police at Orenthal's home. Additionally, a former police officer has published a book detailing various pieces of evidence that point to Orenthal's guilt. During the trial, the prosecutor presented the glove to the court and asked Orenthal to try it on. And it turned out that the glove did not fit him. The glove was so tight that he would have difficulty holding or using a knife. It seems that the prosecution's decision to have Simpson try on the glove was a mistake. The prosecutor's office attempted to indict Orenthal, although there is no direct evidence that he was involved in this tragedy. The defense argued that the real criminal responsible for the deaths was still at large. To bolster their case, the prosecution organized a tour of Orenthal's home, inviting jurors and defense representatives. During the tour, several photos were displayed on the walls, showing Orenthal with members of the Black community. This appeared to be intended to suggest a connection between him and the crime, in an attempt to discredit Orenthal. The visitors included people who knew Orenthal, and they confirmed that they had never seen these photos before. Was the prosecution orchestrating a conspiracy to frame an innocent person? The trial lasted 16 months, during which Orenthal was under house arrest. After both sides presented their closing arguments, the jury began their deliberations. 4 hours later, they returned with a verdict of not guilty for Orenthal James Simpson on charges of double murder. He was acquitted. Orenthal smiled and thanked the jury, and 2 jurors smiled back. However, when the jury left the courtroom, the families of the victims were disappointed with the verdict. The verdict brought a range of emotions. Orenthal's fans celebrated, believing it was a victory for their idol, while the African American community saw it as a significant achievement for their race. Nicole and Ronald's families, on the other hand, were outraged. The trial attracted widespread attention. 9 months after the verdict, Orenthal met with a news reporter to discuss the difficulties he faced after the trial. He mentioned that he had built a career in sports and film, but a long break and reputation issues caused that career to collapse. During this time, he focused on his children and friends. When his ex-wife was alive, their children lived with her. After she passed away, her relatives took the children away during the proceedings. Now, he is fighting for custody of his daughter and son. In 1996, after the criminal trial concluded, the judge granted Orenthal's request for full custody of him and Nicole. Nicole's parents were furious about the ruling and continued to seek custody, but were unsuccessful. They finally dropped their bid in 2006. In December, a civil lawsuit was filed against Orenthal by the families of Nicole and Ronald. This time, the proceedings moved quickly, with the prosecutor's office presenting strong arguments and compelling evidence against Orenthal. This included incontrovertible evidence such as photographs from the time of his arrest, showing him wearing the same shoes that had left prints at the crime scene. This time, Orenthal was confident and decided not to hire an experienced legal team. However, the situation was more complicated than he expected. The case progressed, resulting in a $3.5 million settlement awarded to the victims' families. However, Orenthal never paid most of that money. After these events, he tried to revive his career and later wrote a book. In this book, he recounts how he would commit the murder if he were guilty. The controversial work has outraged the victims' families, who still believe Orenthal was responsible for the murders of Nicole and Ronald. The proceeds from the book's sale were given to the family of Ronald, who was murdered. After the hearings, the case of the double murder faded from public attention and remained inactive for many years. The murder weapon, a knife, was never located. In 2016, the Los Angeles police reported that a retired police had submitted a knife, which was supposedly found years earlier by a construction worker during the demolition of Orenthal's house. However, testing revealed that this knife was not the murder weapon. In 2007, when he and a group of armed men broke into the home of a local sports memorabilia seller, Orenthal later claimed that they were only trying to retrieve valuable items that he considered family heirlooms, for which the two parties had previously been unable to agree on a price. Orenthal maintained that the sole purpose of the break-in was to reclaim his property. Orenthal tried to steal a sports trophy, so he hired the best legal team to defend him in court. It seemed like his situation was dire, especially after police discovered that he and 4 others had used weapons to trespass on someone else's property. Orenthal was charged with 2 counts of robbery and assault with a weapon. Orenthal James Simpson was sentenced to 33 years in prison. The lawyers argued that a 33-year sentence for a failed robbery, with no injuries involved, is excessive. Despite their arguments, the court maintained that its decision was in line with state law, and the appeals were denied. Orenthal was in prison. Some saw him as a champion of justice, while others saw him as a ruthless killer who deserved to be locked up. During his time in prison, tensions between the black community and the police escalated, leading to a number of disturbing incidents. Orenthal was incarcerated for nearly 9 years. At the age of 70, he was unexpectedly paroled under a new amendment aimed at rehabilitating prisoners. After a vote by the board, he was released in October 2017. After these events, Orenthal spent the rest of his life in a peaceful environment surrounded by his loved ones. His children, a son and a daughter from Nicole, believe that their father was wrongly convicted and a victim of discrimination. There is currently no update on the resolution of the murder case of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ronald Goldman. The true nature of Orenthal remains controversial. Was he a fighter for justice? Or was he a ruthless killer who used his wealth and influence to escape the consequences of his actions? Welcome back, mystery lovers. Today's case is going to keep you on the edge of your seat. The case of Katie Sepich. Katie, a 22-year-old woman, was known for her outgoing personality, intelligence, and vibrancy. Born and raised in Carlsbad, New Mexico, she was the eldest of 3 siblings. Katie is Jean's special daughter, admired for her intelligence and charming personality that attracts everyone. Katie graduated from New Mexico State University with a business degree and had plans to start her MBA program in the fall. To support herself, she worked as a waitress at a local Mexican restaurant. During her time at the university, Katie met Joe Bischoff and they quickly formed a close bond. Over time, their friendship blossomed into romance. Katie shared her happiness with her mother, Jean, expressing her hopes of building a life with Joe. Months later, Katie's dream became a possibility when Joe proposed to her with a diamond ring. However, after Katie and Joe graduated in the summer of 2003, they faced challenges in their relationship. Katie decided to stay at the university to continue her studies, while Joe returned to his parents' home in Gallup, New Mexico, a small city about 350 miles away from Las Cruces. This distance put it difficult on their relationship. Despite this, Katie and Joe made an effort to stay in touch and meet whenever possible. On Labor Day weekend in 2003, Joe visited Las Cruces and spent time with Katie. However, their weekend together turned into a tragedy. On Saturday, August 30th, 2003, Katie had fun with Joe and their friends, going from bar to bar and eventually ending up at a local house party. After the party, Katie vanished. The following day, August 31st, 2003, Katie's mother, Jean, received a phone call. This changed her life forever. Recounting that day, Jean described it as follows: she had been preparing for a Labor Day weekend cookout with her family and friends when the phone rang at 2:15 afternoon, bringing news that would shatter her world. The caller asked, "Have you talked to Katie today?" The phone call was from Katie's roommate, Veronica, who had been searching for her and had already contacted Katie's friends and local hospitals without finding any sign of her. Jean was informed by Veronica that Katie had left the party by herself the night before. Veronica and Joe had fallen asleep at the party location, assuming Katie had returned home. However, when they woke up in the morning, Katie was nowhere to be found. Her family immediately contacted the police to report her disappearance. Around the same time, a passerby discovered a half-naked woman's body near a desert landfill. Although there was no identification nearby, police officers arriving at the scene concluded that the body had likely been there for less than 24 hours. It was clear to them that the victim's death was no accident. The victim, estimated to be between 20 and 25 years old, had been stripped of clothing from the waist down. Examination of the body revealed self-defense wounds on her arms, indicating she had put up a fight and scratched her attacker. The police found skin particles under her fingernails, providing them with the perpetrator's DNA. Strangulation marks were visible on her neck, initially suggesting it as the cause of death. The investigators concluded that the young woman did not die at the remote desert landfill where her body was found, as there were no signs of a struggle near the scene. Instead, it appears her body was moved there in an attempt to delay the search. A disturbing detect on the victim's body revealed burn marks on her arms and back, suggesting that the perpetrator had tried to dispose of the body or destroy evidence by setting it on fire. The police quickly made a connection between Katie's disappearance and the discovery of a young woman's body. Katie's father was called to the morgue to identify the body. Katie's mother, Jean, said that the young woman's body was their daughter's. Jean struggled to put into words the immense pain and agony they were enduring. As if they were falling into a deep, dark abyss with no way out, leaving them with no sense of tomorrow or any remaining joy. Katie's father shared that when they lifted the sheet, revealing his daughter's bruised and disfigured face, he was deeply saddened. The residents of once peaceful Los Cruces were shaken by the horrific incident. The police were determined to find the perpetrator as soon as possible, aware that there was no guarantee the person wouldn't commit another crime. The investigation into Katie's case began with a thorough examination of her final hours. The police aimed to piece together her last moments, where she was, who she was with, what she was doing, and if she had any conflicts or enemies. Since the party was about a mile from Katie's home, investigating whether she made it back safely was a priority. To start, the investigators spoke with Veronica, Katie's roommate, and Joe. The detectives found it suspicious that these two stayed at the party while Katie left alone in the middle of the night. However, Joe was uncooperative, stating that Katie had departed, leaving her purse, phone, and keys behind. The investigation team then focused on retracing Katie's route home, going door to door to interview residents, hoping for any leads. Unfortunately, no one saw or heard anything that could help the investigation. Investigations revealed a crucial detect: Katie likely returned to her house but failed to enter it. Notably, she had left her keys behind. Upon searching the house, the investigator found Katie's shoes beside her bedroom window. It appears she attempted to enter through the window but was ambushed. Footprints in the gravel nearby supported this theory. A violent struggle ensued, but sadly, Katie's attacker overpowered her. Further investigation led the authorities to believe that the perpetrator disposed of Katie's body at a desert landfill, attempting to conceal evidence by setting it on fire. The central question remained: was the attacker a stranger or someone Katie trusted? With around 40 party attendees, there was a strong possibility the killer was an acquaintance. Could the perpetrator have been Katie's boyfriend, Joe? This led investigators to interview partygoers, unearthing a critical detail Joe did not mention. Several witnesses reported that Katie saw Joe kissing another girl, which sparked a heated argument between the couple. In her state of anger, Katie hastily left the party alone, forgetting her purse. When questioned by police, Joe neglected to disclose this crucial information. He also did not inform Katie's parents about the incident, despite their curiosity about why Katie had left the party by herself. The investigators questioned Joe again about his whereabouts on the night of Katie's murder. They had discovered that he and Katie had a fight earlier that evening after she saw him kissing another girl. Joe acknowledged the argument and explained that he followed Katie home but did not enter her house. He claimed he saw her bedroom light was off and assumed she was asleep, so he returned to the party. However, the new information sparked suspicion because it indicated Joe was not at the party when the attack occurred, and none of the partygoers could confirm when he returned. During further interviews with party attendees, investigators found another peculiar detail. When he returned to the party, Joe called Katie. Then Joe heard the phone ring, and he realized that she had left her phone at the party. Despite this, Joe continued to phone her until morning. Was he trying to create an alibi or pretend to be concerned about Katie's well-being? Investigators asked Joe to clarify his actions, but he refused to cooperate with them any. Katie loved Joe very much, but he didn't even come to her funeral, which aroused even greater suspicion. Investigators decided to test his DNA. They had collected DNA evidence from Katie's body, mostly under her fingernails, where they found human skin cells. The sample's DNA all belonged to one person. The police needed to compare his DNA to the DNA found on Katie's body. But there were problems with that. Joe was out of town, and his lawyer informed the investigators that Joe refused to provide a DNA sample. The police suspected that Joe was involved in Katie's death, given his suspicious behavior. To confirm that, they needed to find a legitimate way to obtain Joe DNA. However, this took time, and in the meantime, they searched other possible explanations. They investigated similar cases to determine if Katie was the victim of a serial offender. The DNA found on her body was matched against a national database, but no matches were found. The investigators decided to revisit the party where Katie was last seen. They identified the male attendees and asked for their DNA samples, which they all willingly provided. However, none of their DNA matched the samples found on Katie's body, leading the investigators to focus on Joe again. Notably, Joe was the only person who had refused to provide a DNA sample, but the investigators found an alternative method to obtain Joe's DNA sample. Katie and Joe spent time in her bedroom before attending the party, engaging in intimate contact. The police visited Katie's house and collected the bed sheet, hoping to find Joe's DNA. Their efforts were successful, and the lab discovered a sample of male DNA on the sheet. However, the DNA did not match the sample found on Katie's body, indicating that Joe was not the suspect. This discovery raised further questions about Joe's behavior, as he had refused to cooperate with the police despite not being involved in the attack on his girlfriend. The police sent the test results to Joe's lawyer, informing them that he had been cleared as a suspect. Joe agreed to talk to the police again and provided a DNA sample. The results supported the initial findings. Joe was not involved in Katie's crime. When questioned about his initial reluctance to cooperate, Joe explained that he and Katie had been intimate before the party, and he was worried that his DNA would be found on her body. The mystery surrounding Joe's behavior on the night of Katie's death remained unsolved for the police and Katie's family. After Joe was cleared as a suspect, the police explored alternative theories. Party attendees informed investigators that Katie was wearing rings, including the one given by Joe, but none were found on her body when it was discovered. The police believed that the killer removed the rings from Katie's fingers. They searched local pawn shops but did not find Katie's rings. The discovery of specific tire tracks near where Katie's body was found provided another new lead. Experts identified the tire brand and model, and the manufacturer informed the police that these tires were most commonly used on pickup trucks. Unfortunately, this information did not help identify the culprit, and the case hit a dead end. A year after Katie's attack, a similar crime occurred in Wisconsin. A girl in Green Bay was assaulted, set on fire, and left for dead. However, the victim somehow managed to survive by pretending to be dead. Once her attackers left, she put out the flames and sought help at a nearby residence. The survivor described her attackers to the police as two Hispanic men. The police created sketches based on her description and released them to the public. A local farmer recognized the men in the sketches as his workers, Gregorio Morales and Juan. One of them had relatives in Los Cruces, and he often visited them. Both men were arrested. As a result, the police were able to apprehend both suspects. Initially, investigators thought they had identified Katie's attacker, but the DNA test results contradicted this conclusion. The sample's DNA did not match the DNA found on Katie's body. Although Gregorio Morales and Juan were later convicted of assaulting the girl in Green Bay, they were not linked to Katie's case. Gregorio Morales and Juan were sentenced to 50 and 70 years in prison, respectively. The only leads the police had to go on were the tire tracks from the crime scene and the DNA samples of the perpetrator. Katie's family was hopeful that these DNA samples would allow the police to identify the person who took their daughter's life. Unfortunately, there were complications with the DNA evidence. At that time, police were not mandated to collect DNA samples from individuals when they were arrested. Katie's mother was shocked and devastated by the loss of her daughter to a violent man. The family's main concern is to find out the identity of the perpetrator, understand the motive behind this terrible crime, and most importantly, that the killer is held accountable and no longer poses a threat to others. The lead detective gives an update on the case, saying that aside from DNA evidence, they currently lack concrete other leads to investigate further. Katie had fought hard for her life, which resulted in her killer's blood and skin being found under her fingernails. This had allowed investigators to create a DNA profile. Detectives uploaded the DNA into CODIS, the National Forensic Database, and then checked it against the offender database on a weekly basis to see if there was a match. Although they had the killer's identity through the DNA profile, the police needed to find the matching individual in their database to make an identification. Katie's family felt hopeful, they knowing the police would eventually match the DNA to a suspect, bringing them closer to justice for their daughter's tragic death. Katie's murder case saw a major breakthrough 3.5 years later. On December 18, 2006, the lab found a DNA sample that matched the DNA found on Katie's body. The perpetrator was identified as 26 years old Gabriel Avila, a married man of 2. He has a very long previous criminal record and had been released from prison shortly before Katie's death. On November 13, 2003, Gabriel Avila was apprehended by authorities after breaking into an apartment, armed with a knife. Fortunately, 2 young women inside the apartment managed to evade his attack by quickly locking themselves in the bathroom and dialing 911 for emergency assistance. He was convicted of aggravated burglary in March 2004, but released on bond. A flaw in the system caused a significant delay, and it wasn't until 3.5 years later that investigators were able to link him to Katie's death. Gabriel Avila managed to evade police for nearly a year. Then, he being apprehended in November 2004, based on a tip. He received a 9-year prison sentence. While in prison, Gabriel Avila provided a DNA sample, but it took 2 more years to be tested. Once the results showed a partial match with the DNA from Katie's crime scene, investigators quickly jumped into action. They found the truck Gabriel Avila used to dispose of Katie's body and discovered a ring belonging to her in the center console. In 2006, after finding a ring belonging to Katie in Gabriel Avila truck, detectives investigating Katie's case visited his in prison. Gabriel Avila confessed to the crime, explaining that while his wife was away, he was in the area to buy illicit substances. He claimed that he approached Katie and offered her a ride, which she declined. Later that night, Gabriel Avila encountered Katie again in front of her house. He stopped and offered her assistance, and that Katie told him she was locked out without her purse. Gabriel Avila attempted to help her, but he then attacked and began undressing Katie. What followed was a violent assault. After the assault, Gabriel Avila panicked and decided to strangle Katie out of fear that she would identify him. Despite Katie putting up a brief struggle, Gabriel Avila restrained her, unable to let go, ultimately leading to her death. Gabriel Avila claimed he put Katie in his pickup truck and drove her to a desert landfill, where he left her body on the ground. He attempted to burn the body, thinking it would eliminate evidence. But this effort was unsuccessful. A new DNA sample from Gabriel Avila matched the DNA found at the scene. When authorities found DNA on Katie's body in 2003, her parents were optimistic that it would help quickly find a suspect. However, at the time, there was a significant gap in the law. In New Mexico and most states, it was illegal to take DNA when someone was arrested. DNA could only be collected from individuals who had been convicted of a crime and sent to prison. This meant that the DNA on Katie's body couldn't initially be matched. The trial of Gabriel Avila, who was accused of the crime, began in 2017. Gabriel Avila apologized to Katie's family during the trial. His lawyer asked the judge to consider showing leniency, emphasizing that Gabriel Avila was genuinely remorseful for his actions. In contrast, District Attorney Susana Martinez countered that it took Gabriel Avila more than 3 years to confess to the crimes, and he only did so after detectives presented him with DNA evidence. At the sentencing, David, Katie's father, pleaded with the judge to hand down a severe punishment. He stressed that because Katie would never have another opportunity in life, it was only fair that her killer should not be given a chance to be free again. In May 2007, Gabriel Avila was found guilty and sentenced to 69 years in prison. After serving 30 years, he will be eligible for parole around 2043. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Michaela Garrecht. Sharon Murch and her husband, Rod Garrecht, had been trying to have a child for 5 years. After numerous visits to doctors and fertility treatments, they were overjoyed when their daughter Michaela Garrecht was born on January 24, 1979, in Oakland, California. Her parents affectionately referred to her as their miracle child due to the difficulties they faced in conceiving her. After that, their family soon welcomed 2 new members, a daughter named Libby and a son named Alex. In 1986, the family relocated to Hayward, where they settled down, established their home, and raised their children. As a child, Michaela was known for being intelligent, lively, and well-behaved. She listened attentively to her parents and followed their advice closely. Sharon was a caring and attentive mother. Sometimes it makes others feel like she's being overprotective of her children. Given the rise in child abductions in California during the 1980s, her caution was understandable. As a result, she always kept her children close to home and ensured they were never far from adult supervision. On Saturday, November 19, 1988, Michaela finished breakfast with her family. Her best friend, 9-year-old Katrina Rodriguez, stopped by to ask if Michaela could accompany her to the local grocery store to buy snacks. Initially, Sharon, Michaela's mother, refused permission. However, Michaela persisted, assuring her mother that they would be safe and return quickly. Eventually, Sharon relented and gave her permission to go with you. As a precaution, Sharon reminded they to be careful. She gave Michaela $5, then the girls eagerly grabbed their scooters and left. Before leaving, Michaela expressed her love for her mother. As Sharon watched them leave, her husband Rod decided to go outside and work on the car. Meanwhile, Sharon headed back inside to clean up the breakfast dishes. Unbeknownst to her, the next few minutes would alter her life forever. Michaela and Katrina eagerly rode their scooters to the Rainbow Market on Mission Boulevard and parked them right outside the store. The girls then entered the market to buy some snacks. They purchased 2 Mountain Dew sodas, 2 beef jerky sticks, and 2 cherry toffees before exiting the store. Engrossed in a conversation about their holiday plans, they completely forgot about their scooters. As they were about to leave the parking lot, they suddenly remembered their scooters were still outside. To their surprise, the scooters was missing. The girls decided to split up and search for it. Michaela spotted the scooter first, It had been moved about 3 parking spaces away and was now standing beside a car. Without hesitation, Michaela rushed over to the scooter and bent down to grab the handlebars. In a rapid and unexpected turn of events, a man leapt from the car and grabbed Michaela around her waist. He then forcefully pushed her into the back seat. Witnessing the shocking scene unfold, Katrina momentarily froze, her eyes fixed on the chaotic scene as her friend struggled to break free from the abductor's grasp. The car sped away from the parking space, accelerating down Mission Boulevard toward Union City. Regaining her composure, Katrina rushed back into the store and alerted the cashier, Rona Ranilan, about the kidnapping. Rona quickly called the local police, and they were quickly present at the crime scene. Additionally, Rona also contacted Katrina's father and told them what had just happened to their daughter. Sharon was doing the dishes at home when she heard a frantic shout from outside. Her husband, Rod, burst through the front door, telling her that Michaela had just been kidnapped outside the Rainbow Market. Along with Katrina's father, they rushed to the store and found police everywhere, questioning customers and staff. Katrina was extremely upset and was allowed to go home with her father. Rod and Sharon stayed behind, hoping to get some information about what had happened. However, as Sharon waited anxiously, she couldn't shake off a growing sense of fear. Sharon recalled a poem written by Michaela. She also remembered an incident from the week before that had left her unsettled. Specifically, Sharon had woken up early one morning to find Michaela sitting at the breakfast table, writing in the early hours. Michaela's mother asked her what she was working on, and Michaela vaguely replied that she was writing a poem. Sharon asking repeatedly what the poem was about. Michaela finally explained that her poem was inspired by the noises she had heard coming from the attic that morning. She had been thinking about people who were kidnapped and being held captive, and her poem was about their experiences. She explained that the poem actually referred to individuals who were being detained against their will, rather than those who had been kidnapped and murdered. Sharon found Michaela's poem to be disturbing and out of character, as her daughter was typically a happy person. In hindsight, Sharon believes that Michaela may have written the poem as a kind of prophecy or premonition. The police were provided with a description of the man who allegedly kidnapped Michaela. Rona, a cashier, told them that the suspect was a white male in his 30s with a mustache. She also reported that he drove a car that was either burgundy or maroon in color, but was unable to provide details about the make or model. According to Rona, the man had parked his car and gotten out, but instead of entering the store, he looked through the window, observing the girls and other customers without entering. She suspected he might be planning to rob the store. A sketch artist created a composite picture, then distributed to local police stations and news outlets. The investigators found the scooter used in the abduction and collected it as evidence. They obtained a handprint from the scooter handle, which was added to their database to identify the kidnapper. But it did not lead to any leads. The day after the kidnapping, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI, joined the investigation, they suspecting a relevance between a series of local child kidnappings, but this was ultimately not confirmed. Police soon realized that Katrina could provide more information about the suspect since she was the main witness to the abduction. 2 days after the incident, investigators visited her home. They spoke with her and her parents, and the information she provided shocked them. Her description of the kidnapper greatly differed from the one provided by the store cashier. Katrina described him as a young white male in his early 20s with dirty blonde hair, severe acne scarring, and blue eyes. Katrina vividly recalled the suspect's eyes, describing them to investigators as fox eyes. She explained that despite his look straight at her, but he didn't seem to recognize her. Additionally, she told investigators that the suspect's car was beige or tan in color, box-shaped, and had noticeable body damage. The new description raises concerns as it means the crucial 48 hours to find a suspect has been wasted on finding the wrong person. Investigators reprinted posters with the new suspect's description and redistributed them throughout the area. Armed with this fresh information, they began visiting local sex offenders, inquiring about potential leads. A large number of volunteers joined, going door to door and distributing posters that detailed Michaela's clothing: a white Metro t-shirt, rolled-up blue denim jeans, black Mary Jane shoes, and pearl-colored feather-shaped earrings. After searching the nearby suburbs but finding no sign of Michaela, police expanded their search, include the Garin National Park and Niles Canyon, which are just a short distance from the She home. This decision was prompted by a tip from 3 hikers, who claimed to have found footprints in the forest area, belonging to 1 adult and 1 child. Upon following the tracks, the hikers discovered a blanket and empty fast food containers. A psychological analysis of the kidnapper suggested they would likely take Michaela to a secluded location. To aid in the search, helicopters were equipped with infrared thermal cameras to detect heat signatures in the dense wooded areas. Police officers also combed the area on horseback and on foot, but these efforts did not produce any results. Unfortunately, Michaela and her kidnapper seemed to have vanished without a trace. The search for Michaela made national headlines, and her case was featured on prominent television programs such as Unsolved Mysteries and America's Most Wanted. Her photo was also distributed on milk cartons, and the Missing Children's program sent over 50 million mailing cards to homes across the country. These cards included a picture of Michaela, a description of her clothing, and a composite sketch of the kidnapper. San Francisco 49ers quarterback Joe Montana publicly showed his support for the Michaela family and urged the public to come forward with any information. A $70,000 reward was offered for any information related to Michaela's disappearance. Within the first year, the police received over 5,000 tips, the majority of which were unfounded rumors. Despite this, the community remained dedicated to finding Michaela. Sharon conducted her own investigation and found some clues, some taking her as far as Russia, but none produced any results. A significant break in the case occurred between 1991 and 1992, when an inmate in Indiana provided authorities with crucial information regarding Michaela's disappearance. Roger Haggard, who was serving an 11-year sentence for burglary, claimed to have helped a friend bury Michaela's body in a gladiolus field in Union City. At first, the investigators were skeptical and did not think his claims were credible enough to be investigated further. Undeterred, Roger decided to reach out to the media for help. In 1992, he wrote a letter to the San Francisco Chronicle, stating that he knew who had kidnapped Michaela and where her body was buried. He offered to lead investigators to the location. Hen investigators brought Roger to California to testify before a grand jury. Roger repeated his earlier claims under oath, promised to lead investigators to Michaela's burial site and the home of her killer. The next day, a team of investigators accompanied Roger to the field where he claimed Michaela's body was buried. After 8 hours of searching, Roger confessed that his claim was false. He explained that his intention was to provide the Michaela family a sense of peace after all these years. This confession had even more serious consequences for Roger. He was charged with perjury and received an additional 6 years prison sentence, along with an order to pay $6,000 in damages to Michaela's family for giving them false hope. This development would not be the only one to shake the investigation. Authorities also kept an eye on another individual, Lawrence Binder, 43, a wastewater treatment plant worker. He appeared to be a normal man, married with a family. However, suspicions were raised when investigators received a tip from East Bay Area parents about his disturbing behavior. These parents claimed that he had been sending gifts and money to young girls in an attempt to befriend them. What's more, some of the letters he wrote were written in reverse, requiring the recipient to use a mirror to decipher their meaning. As investigators dug deeper into Lawrence's past, they found that he drove a distinctive light blue van with the license plate, "Love You." The interior of the van was peculiarly decorated with photos of small children, children's drawings, and biblical verses. Furthermore, Lawrence had a previous arrest record for attempting to lure two young girls into his van, although the charges were eventually dropped. Lawrence often inserted himself into investigations of missing children. For instance, following the 1988 disappearance of Michaela, he reached out to her mother, Sharon. He also contacted Kim Schwartz, the mother of 7-year-old Amber Schwartz, who went missing in June 1988. In both cases, the mothers eventually told the police that they felt uneasy about Lawrence's persistence in contacting them and trying to stay updated on the developments in their daughters' cases. After uncovering a series of unusual circumstances, the investigation led authorities to suspect Lawrence of being involved in a series of child abductions. When Amber went missing, Lawrence wrote to the police predicting the next victim would be a 9-year-old girl. This proved true when Michaela missing. Lawrence further raised suspicions when he's sending a Christmas card with a picture of a girl holding up 4 fingers to an FBI profiler. This incident took on a more ominous tone when 4-year-old Amanda Campbell went missing on December 27, 1991. Lawrence was also linked to the disappearance of Eileen Mischelhoff, a 13-year-old girl from Dublin, California. As Lawrence's name became associated with the string of child abductions, he found himself under intense media scrutiny. His unusual behavior and fascination with the cases sparked widespread public interest, leading many people to suspect he was involved. As a result, Lawrence and his family faced harassment and public backlash. However, after Lawrence sued the city of Fairfield for defamation and won, investigators began to reassess his role in the case. It became clear that he was not as involved as initially thought, and many believed he was simply trying to insert himself into the investigation. Despite the mystery surrounding Lawrence, the case remained a complex challenge for investigators. In addition, there is a new suspect, Curtis Dean Anderson. He was arrested in August 2000 and subsequently linked to a series of heinous crimes. After his arrest, Anderson confessed to the 1999 abduction and murder of 7-year-old Ziana Fairchild from Vallejo, California. During a 2007 FBI interview, Anderson made a shocking claim: he had murdered 13 additional women and girls. He also admitted to abducting and killing 7-year-old Amber Schwartz, whom he had seen standing on a street corner. However, Curtis's life ended abruptly on December 9, 2007, when he died due to kidney and liver failure. This untimely death prevented investigators from gathering more information about Curtis's past crimes. Following his confession, investigators looked into Curtis's background and found a coincidence. In 1989, he was pulled over in a brown 1977 Chevy sedan, matched the vehicle description given by a witness named Katrina. Despite Curtis's death, his confession reignited interest in a more notorious case, the kidnapping of Michaela. The renewed investigation brought new attention and generated fresh leads. However, a new development in August 2012 shed more light on the case. Wesley Sherman-Teen, one half of the notorious Speed Freaks duo, reached out to the Stockton Record after his accomplice, Loren Herzog, took his own life in January that year. Wesley pointed out that Loren was to bear an uncanny resemblance to the suspect's composite in Michaela's case. The resemblance between Loren and the kidnapper is further confirmed by Katrina's observations, which indicate that Loren shares very similar characteristics to Michaela's kidnapper. Following a lead from Wesley, investigators began excavating a well in Linden, California, where him and Loren was believed to have disposed of Michaela's remains. The excavation uncovered thousands of bone fragments, some likely belonging to Michaela. Although investigators never lost hope of solving the case, the mystery continued to baffle them. It wasn't until 8 years later that a useful clue finally emerged. The circumstances surrounding Michaela's disappearance were horrifying and had a profound impact on the public. However, more shocking revelations were yet to come. On December 21, 2020, the Hayward Police Department and FBI made a significant announcement in the Michaela case, revealing a surprising development. Despite initial suspicions focusing on Loren and Wesley, but then investigators charged 61 years old David Garrick with Michaela's kidnapping and murder. Advances in technology played a crucial role in solving the case, by linking David's fingerprints to those found on Michaela's scooter 32 years earlier, in 1988. David Misch has been charged with the murder of Michaela and is currently in custody at Santa Rita Jail in Alameda County. An examination of David's past reveals a disturbing pattern of crime that dates back to his teenage years. Born on February 19, 1961, in Chicago, Illinois, little is known about David's upbringing. However, by the age of 16, he had already become involved in criminal activities. In 1977, he was convicted of breaking into a house where he sexually assaulted a maid at knife point. He was arrested and sentenced but was paroled just a year later, in 1978. David's troubles with the law continued. In February 1979, he was arrested for charges of false imprisonment and assault with a deadly weapon, which were later updated to assault with intent to rape. Despite this, he became eligible for parole in September 1981. Years later, in May 1988, David was arrested for burglary at a San Leandro grocery store. He was sentenced to 1 year in prison and 1 year of probation. In November of the same year, he was released from custody after 6 months. However, his luck eventually ran out in December 1988. That year, a tragic incident happened to his longtime friend Margaret Ball, who was 38 years old. She often helped him in times of need, but the nature of their relationship took a drastic turn. Margaret's dead body was discovered by her stepdaughter in a pool of blood, brutally beaten and stabbed. The crime scene was particularly gruesome, with Margaret's front tooth found a few feet away from her body due to the severity of the beating. The police were led to David as the primary suspect after discovering evidence linking him to the crime. He was arrested and eventually convicted of Margaret's murder, while David was already serving time for Margaret's murder. New evidence led to additional charges against him. In 2018, he was sentenced to 18 years to life for Margaret's murder. A DNA analysis later implicated David in 2 murders that occurred in Fremont, California, in 1986. 2 young women, Michelle Xavier, 18, and her best friend, Jennifer Dewey, 20, had gone out to celebrate a family member's birthday dinner on February 2, 1986. After leaving the restaurant, they stopped at a convenience store. However, shortly after midnight, their bodies were found on the side of the road by a motorcyclist. The scene revealed a disturbing and violent crime. The women were stripped naked, they had been stabbed and shot. An autopsy later revealed that they had also been sexually assaulted. The car Michelle was driving was discovered 6 miles away from the crime scene in a grocery store parking lot. Michaela's case was forgotten for many years due to lack of clues and information. However, 32 years later, advances in DNA technology led detectives to a suspect, David Garrick. He is currently serving time, faces additional charges, including 3 counts of murder and 1 count of abduction, which could result in the death penalty. Chief Hayward vowed to continue the search for Michaela's body and remains hopeful that she will be found. Michaela's father, Rod Garrick, traveled over 100 miles to attend a recent press conference. He expressed a sense of relief knowing that the police have caught suspect. The authorities have a suspect to question, and hopefully, this person will provide information about Michaela's whereabouts. Sharon, Michaela's mother, was unable to attend a press conference due to her ongoing battle with metastatic cancer. Police Chief Hayward read a statement on her behalf, which revealed her struggle to accept the reality of her daughter's fate. In the past year, she had to accept the likelihood that Michaela was no longer alive. However, she found comfort in imagining her in a peaceful afterlife, sitting on clouds, walking on golden streets, dancing on hills, and so a ring among the stars. Bernie Castillo, the attorney for David, has been vocal about the case and strongly criticizes the investigation methods used to charge his client. He dismisses the evidence as junk science and finds it implausible that a handprint match was suddenly found after 32 years. Bernie believes the police are trying to pin the blame solely on David as a convenient way to close the case. Meanwhile, Katrina, Michaela's close friend and witness to the case, has been carrying guilt over, still remembers the tragic incident that occurred that Saturday morning. She feels that it should have been her, as the scooter that was moved belonged to her. This burden of guilt has caused Katrina to suppress memories of her childhood. In contrast, Sharon, Michaela's mother, dedicated her life to finding her daughter. Initially, she waited anxiously for news at the telephone and later turned to the internet for answers. However, after David was charged with Michaela's murder, Sharon's fight for justice began to fade due to her cancer diagnosis. She eventually passed away in May 2022, finding solace in the fact that she would soon be reunited with her daughter. A new twist has arisen in the complicated case of David, who is currently awaiting trial for his alleged involvement in the kidnapping and murder of Michaela, as well as the murders of Michelle and Jennifer. The search for justice for Michaela has been going on for decades, but may now face a significant obstacle. It seems David, the suspect, might not face the full severity of the punishment for the allegations against him. In contrast, David's defense attorney, Ernie, viewed the news as validation, stating that each case against David relies on questionable forensic tactics. Bernie was not surprised by the decision, as it confirms his long-held belief that the prosecution's case has significant weaknesses. Others, however, disagree with the decision. Chuck Euler, a retired lieutenant who worked on another case involving David, believed he should receive the maximum sentence for his crimes. David is currently awaiting trial for 3 counts of murder and 1 count of kidnapping. His case is closely tied to the mysterious disappearance of Michaela, a story filled with unexpected twists and turns. However, the investigation was marred by an initial case of mistaken identity, leading police to waste valuable time in the first 2 days. As a result, Michaela's family was left searching for answers for decades. Hey detectives! Welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Alison Bonilla. Alison Pamela Bonilla Vasquez was born on November 7, 2001, in Cartago, Costa Rica. She is an only child, living with her mother Yendrai Vasquez. In addition to her mother, her grandparents Ramon and Marjorie, and her aunt Samara also helped raise Alison. Alison's father left the family shortly after her birth. He chose to be with another woman who was pregnant. He did not want to play a role in Alison's life. Only once, when he was diagnosed with lung cancer, did he ask to see his daughter, and Yendrai allowed him to. It is worth noting that his second family did not know about Alison's existence. Alison and her mother, Yendrai, had a particularly close relationship. For Alison, Yendrai was not only a mother but also a father. Therefore, Alison often gave her mother gifts on Father's Day. Their relationship went beyond the typical mother-daughter relationship. Alison felt comfortable sharing everything with Yendrai without fear of being misunderstood or judged. Despite not having a father, Alison did not feel lonely or abandoned. She had a large family and enjoyed spending time with them. She also attended church regularly every Sunday. Relatives described Allison as a kind, outgoing, and friendly girl. In photos, she always looked happy, and there was no sign of sadness or longing in her eyes. Allison had always dreamed of becoming a model. She decided to drop out of 8th grade to focus on makeup classes, thinking that combining the two was too difficult. She did not want to waste time on something that would not help her achieve her goals. After that, Allison started looking for a job to help her mother pay the bills but did not receive any responses from the places she applied. This made her very sad. Her mother, Yendrai, realized that her daughter would have difficulty finding a job due to her limited education, so she encouraged Allison to take evening classes. At age 18, Allison enrolled in Liceo Enrique Geyer, a few miles from home. During this time, she completed a pastry course and began practicing. Allison made delicious cakes and desserts that were loved by everyone in the neighborhood. This helped her find a way to make money from her baking talent. Allison had a boyfriend named Harold Sura Solano who lived in Cachi, a district in the province of Cartago, Costa Rica. Usually, Allison stayed home with her mother in the morning, then met Harold, and then went to evening school at 6 o'clock. She often returned home late by bus. The route from the bus stop to her house was dangerous, dark, and deserted. Therefore, Allison always informed her mother of her location, and sometimes her mother picked her up at the bus stop or halfway. On March 4, 2020, Allison went to her mother's nail salon, then visited her classmate Pal for about 15 minutes. They arrived at school at 6 p.m. and separated because they had different classes. Allison arrived at school and waited in an empty classroom for about 15 minutes before realizing that her classes had been canceled for the day. Instead of going home right away, she decided to visit her aunt who lived near the school. However, her aunt was not home. Allison then decided to go to her boyfriend Harold's house. When she arrived, she learned that Harold was at work but would be back soon. Harold's mother invited Allison inside to wait. When Harold returned, the family had dinner together, talking about a variety of topics and discussing future plans. After dinner, Harold excused himself for a moment, saying that he had urgent business to attend to but would be back soon. At 8:15 p.m., Allison left Harold's house without waiting for him to return. This set off a chain of events that would become nationally known. Harold returned home about 5 minutes later and, seeing that Allison had left, texted her to ask where she was and offered to give her a ride home on his bike. Allison replied immediately that she had already arrived at the bus stop. While waiting for the bus, she texted her friend Pa to ask if Pa's cousin could give her a ride home on his bike. However, Pa's cousin refused because his bike was a special type and not suitable for two people. It is unclear why Allison did not ask her boyfriend for help. She may have been angry with him or did not want to bother him. Allison got off the bus at 8:43 p.m. Her house was about a mile away. Feeling anxious and scared, she texted her mother to pick her up. At 8:45 p.m., Allison texted her boyfriend and mother that two suspicious men had gotten out of a car and were following her. She decided to run home to avoid them. The road Allison was on was dangerous, poorly lit, and had few people. There was only one security camera there, which captured a blurry image that could have been Allison. Allison's mother, Yendrai, went to the bridge half a mile from their home to pick up her daughter but did not see her. She tried to stay calm, thinking that Allison might have gone back to the bus stop for safety. However, she did not find her there either. She finally thought that Allison had not seen her and had gone home on her own. When Yendrai returned home, she found that Allison was not there. She immediately called relatives and friends to ask for help in the search. About 30 minutes later, Harold woke up and received a call from his Aunt Samara saying Allison was missing. He tried to contact Yendrai but was unsuccessful. 3 hours later, Yendrai reported Allison missing to the police, and the search began. Luckily, Yendrai had the last photo of Allison in the clothes she was wearing. Police checked several locations, from the bus stop to Allison's house, Catchy Lake, and the nearby hydroelectric dam. On March 5, 2020, police found their first clue, Allison's glasses in the grass about a mile from her house. However, Allison seemed to have disappeared without a trace. 8 days later, they discovered Allison's identification on a coffee plantation. This was surprising because they had checked the area several times before. What was even more suspicious was that her ID was placed in such a conspicuous and clean location. As if someone had intentionally placed it there to mislead the investigation or hide something. 15 days after Allison went missing, Yendrai received a call from Allison's father. Instead of showing concern or offering help, he said that Allison was missing because she was too beautiful. Shocked by these insensitive words, Yendrai immediately hung up the phone, unable to believe what she had just heard. For a long time, the family, police, and volunteers continued to search for Allison. Every Sunday, they hung up posters with her picture. One day, they decided to paint messages on the streets, recreating Allison's journey from the intersection to the bridge, where she was believed to have disappeared. They also put up posters on roadside poles to attract the attention of passers-by. At the same time, the police received an important clue. A man came to the police station and said that he knew Allison and had seen her on the night she disappeared. According to the man, at around 8:30 p.m. On March 4th, he left his home on his motorbike to pick someone up. On the way, he saw Allison and a burgundy two-door BMW parked next to her. He turned around to check on the situation and realized it was his cousin's BMW. He was 100% sure of this because the car had distinctive bright yellow headlights. Another witness also confirmed to the police that he had seen the same BMW near where Allison went missing that evening. The car belonged to Nelson Sanchez Urania, 28, nicknamed Sukia. Locals called him that because they believed he was a member of a gang in the area. In fact, Nelson and Allison knew each other. Their families had been acquainted for a long time and had lived in the same neighborhood for a while. However, according to Allison's mother, they had only interacted with Nelson a few times. It was just a normal neighborly relationship, not a close friendship. One day, Nelson offered to give Allison and her cousins a ride home. She agreed because it was morning, she was not alone. And she thought Nelson was a good person. On March 2, 2020, 2 days before Allison went missing, Nelson contacted her via Facebook. He sent a message asking Allison to answer some questions. On her cousin's advice, Allison agreed to answer them. Next, Nelson asked Allison about her feelings for him. Specifically, he wanted to know if Allison liked him. Allison was confused by Nelson's sudden question, as they were not close and barely knew each other. When Allison asked why, Nelson explained that he did not have a negative opinion of her but wanted to know if she thought badly of him. Allison reassured Nelson that she did not hate him and that everything was normal between them. Nelson thanked her and said goodbye. Police searched Nelson's home and seized his car, cell phone, and computer. Investigators found shocking images of women being abused on his phone. When they inspected the car, they found that it had been thoroughly cleaned with car polish. However, the front driver's seat carpet and trunk carpet had been removed. Police found hair and blood on the trunk lid and sent samples to a lab for analysis. After examining the exterior of the car, police used a police dog to search for traces. The dog detected possible blood on the 2 front seats and in the trunk. To confirm, the police used a luminol test, a chemical that reacts with hemoglobin in the blood. The results showed that there were many blood stains on the car's interior, despite the owner's efforts to remove them with cleaning products. While waiting for the results from the lab, Nelson remained free but was closely monitored by the police. They monitored his every move to prevent him from leaving the city or the country. Although Yendrai repeatedly requested his arrest, the police did not have enough evidence to do so. Therefore, Nelson continued to live freely without being prosecuted for many months. Yendrai believed that Allison had been kidnapped for ransom. She tried to stay calm and hoped that her daughter was still alive. In preparation for Allison's return, Yendrai kept her daughter's room as it was, not cleaning or rearranging the furniture. She even bought Allison a gift. Yendrai told the press, "I will continue to do so. As long as there is no evidence that she is dead, I still believe that my daughter is alive and will return home." Laboratory test results confirmed that the hair and blood found in Nelson's car belonged to Allison. The police immediately arrested Nelson. Later, his ex-girlfriend told the police that Nelson had never physically abused her but had put a lot of mental pressure on their relationship. Specifically, he forbade her from contacting her friends and using the internet. According to her, Nelson only wanted to have a sexual relationship with her. His previous boss revealed that he was very irresponsible at work and even stole about $11,000. Additionally, his landlord said an ex-girlfriend had broken up with him because she was tired of paying his debts. She described him as a very spoiled man. After that, Nelson confessed to his crimes against Allison. He said that on the night of Allison's disappearance, he found her walking alone on a deserted road. Taking advantage of the late hour and their acquaintance, Nelson offered to give Allison a ride. She agreed and got into the car without suspicion. However, instead of taking her home, Nelson drove to a remote coffee plantation and forced Allison out of the car. Nelson violently attacked her, knocking off her glasses and leaving her nearly unconscious. He dragged her to a nearby abandoned house, where he raped and brutally beat her. Nelson then tied her hands with cloth and duct tape to the front seat of his car. Finally, he stuffed her into the trunk of the car and drove to a dumpster in San Giorano Caci. There, the killer pushed Allison off a cliff into a pile of trash below. He justified his heinous actions by saying that he was under the influence of drugs. He also admitted that he had long been obsessed with Allison, and when he saw her that night, he decided it was his chance to carry out his dark intentions. Surprisingly, Nelson later recanted his initial statement, accusing the police of coercing him into confessing. However, the authorities had enough evidence to charge him despite his denials. The suspect could face a maximum sentence of 35 years in prison. In the early morning of September 4th, a search party went to the San Anno landfill to look for Allison's body. However, because the area was large and difficult to access, finding Allison's remains was an extremely difficult task. Moreover, it had been 6 months since Allison went missing. Just 25 days after Allison confessed, the police discovered a number of important pieces of evidence. They found human bone fragments, including a spine, ribs, part of the pelvis, and a femur. They also found pieces of clothing that Allison was wearing on the day she disappeared, along with a pair of sneakers with studs inside. All of these clues were sent for testing and thorough analysis by the police. José Francisco Herrera, the suspect's defense attorney, questioned the authenticity of the evidence because it was found by volunteers, not professional police. He also said that the discovery of the remains coincided with the time his client declared his innocence, which was suspicious. Rodrigo Era, the attorney representing Allison's family, on the other hand, criticized the suspect's change of testimony, saying that it undermined the credibility of the official investigation. On October 5, 2020, experts confirmed that the remains found belonged to Allison. Because only a partial body was found, they were unable to determine the exact cause of death. However, examination of the remains revealed multiple fractures that appeared after death, suggesting she may have fallen from a great height. Her clothes were torn and her sneakers had bite marks, suggesting a possible animal attack. This would explain why the remains were found scattered in different areas of the landfill. Allison's mother, Yendrai, is furious with the police for not listening and acting promptly. She believes that if they had arrested Nelson sooner, he would have confessed and Allison's body would have been found in better condition. This is an irreparable loss for the family. Despite the terrible pain she is enduring, Yendrai finds some solace in saying, "My daughter is in a better place now, where no one can hurt her anymore." The trial of Nelson took place on July 19, 2021. Harold, Allison's boyfriend, was a key witness in the case. According to Harold's testimony, on the afternoon of March 4, 2020, at approximately 6:30 p.m., he returned home and found Allison there with her mother. Harold then left for approximately 5 to 10 minutes. When he returned, he discovered that Allison had left without saying anything. While Allison was on her way home, Harold texted her repeatedly. As soon as she got off the bus, Allison texted Harold to say that two men were following her. Concerned for her safety, Harold suggested that she take a taxi and promised to pay for it. However, Allison refused twice and said that she would run home. Harold did not receive any further response from Allison after that text message. According to his explanation, he only informed his mother of the situation. He did not contact Allison's mother, Yendrai, because his phone battery died. He then fell asleep for about 30 minutes. It was Allison's aunt who called him to inform him that his girlfriend was missing. Since then, he said he has been worried and tried to call Allison several times, but all the calls went to voicemail. He also could not be reached via WhatsApp messages. Harold said he joined the search party for a few days but then had to stop because he felt unwell and had to go to work. He really wished things had gone differently. If he could go back in time, he would have taken Allison home that night. However, unfortunately, what happened cannot be changed. On August 18, 2021, the court sentenced Nelson to 18 years in prison for taking the life of Allison. He could have received twice the sentence, but the judge pointed out that there was no evidence to confirm that Nelson knew the route and time Allison would return home and that he planned to attack her. Furthermore, due to the condition of Allison's remains, there was no evidence that Nelson forced her to have sex. The story does not end there. Allison's family was not satisfied with the original sentence, arguing that it was not commensurate with the crime. In 2022, they successfully appealed, and the court decided to retry the case. As a result, on September 28, 2023, Nelson was sentenced to 35 years in prison. Allison's family's lawyer emphasized that Nelson acted in a cruel and inhumane manner and took advantage of the trust of the victim and her relatives. The court ruled that Nelson's actions were intentional. Nelson used his long-standing relationship with Allison to commit the crime. The criminal court also took into account Nelson's lack of remorse for his actions. Although still hurt and angry, the victim's family was relieved by the new verdict. The decision ended a painful chapter in their lives that lasted more than 3 years and put an end to this nightmare. Allison's family created a memorial at the spot where her body was found. They placed a cross, flowers, and a small altar with a photo of Allison and a statue of the Virgin Mary. Allison's case has caused a stir in Costa Rican media and social media. It has also led to many marches in memory of Allison and other women who have been victims of similar violence. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Allison Baden-Clay. Allison Baden-Clay was born on July 1, 1968 in a suburb of Brisbane. She grew up in a wealthy family and developed a love for ballet from an early age. After completing her schooling, she pursued further studies and proved herself to be an excellent student, fluent in 6 languages. In 1993, at the age of 25, Allison entered a local beauty pageant, where she impressed the audience with her ballet skills. She then began her professional career in the Human Resources Department at the Brisbane Flight Centre. Here, her career progressed rapidly after her talent was recognized by her boss. It was while working at the center that she met her future husband, Gerard. Gerard Baden-Clay was born on September 9, 1970 in Bournemouth, United Kingdom. Gerard comes from a distinguished lineage, with his great-grandfather, Robert Baden-Powell, a prominent British military leader and founder of the Scouting movement. Gerard moved to Zambia with his family when he was 1 year old, as it was the homeland of his father, Nigel Clay. They remained in Zambia for 8 years before migrating to Australia. Gerard then completed his studies in Australia, graduating with a degree in accounting. He eventually joined the Brisbane Flight Centre, where he met Allison. Gerard met Allison at the Brisbane Flight Centre, marking the beginning of their romance. They married on August 23, 1997, and then went on a trip around the world, visiting several countries including South America and Switzerland, with a temporary stay in London. When they returned to Australia, Allison returned to work at the flight centre, eventually being promoted to a management position. In 2002, Allison became pregnant and gave birth to her first child, a daughter named Hannah. After Hannah was born, Allison decided to focus solely on raising her children and taking care of her family. Gerard made several career changes during this time and opened a luxury real estate company in Brisbane in 2004. With the help of his parents, he invested a lot of time and effort into the business. The Gerard family had a second daughter, Sarah, born in 2004, followed by their youngest child, Ella, born in 2006. The family lived in a rented house in Brookfield, a suburb of Brisbane. Meanwhile, Allison spent most of her time looking after the girls at home. Over time, Allison began to notice that Gerard was increasingly distant from her. This eventually led to a shocking confession that he no longer loved her. Gerard's behavior towards Allison changed dramatically. He constantly criticized her, complaining about the meals she cooked and the cleanliness of the house. He called her lazy and said she was no longer attractive to him. Allison chose to remain silent in the face of these hurtful comments. In her diary, she poured out her heart, expressing her enduring love for Gerard, their frequent arguments, her feelings of guilt, and her determination to change to win his love back. Allison hid her family troubles behind a cheerful exterior, making her appear to be a warm, caring person, a devoted mother, and a loving wife. However, her family life took a difficult turn in 2011. Gerard's business suffered after the Queensland floods, resulting in a significant debt of around $1 million Australian dollars. That same year, in October, Allison discovered that Gerard was secretly having an affair with Tony McHugh, a co-worker. Gerard and Tony met in 2008 when Tony was a client, and Gerard hired her. At the time, Tony was having marital problems after 17 years of marriage, which eventually led to Tony's divorce. Tony knew Gerard was married, but Gerard said that the relationship with Allison was loveless and that he was only staying for their daughter. Gerard promised Tony a future together, and that he would marry her. In October 2011, Allison discovered that Gerard was having an affair with Tony. Gerard immediately ended the relationship and severed ties with Tony by firing her from his real estate company, and reconciled with Allison. Tony still harbored hopes for a future with Gerard. For months later, in April 2012, Tony and Gerard were talking on the phone while Tony was driving home. They discussed an upcoming real estate conference, and Gerard casually mentioned that Tony would be meeting Allison there the next day. This revelation upset Tony, causing her to question the promises he had made to her, and to call him dishonest. Gerard apologized to Tony, reaffirmed his love for her, and reiterated his commitment to ending his marriage to Allison within 3 months. The following morning, April 20th, at 7:14 a.m., Gerard contacted the police in a distressed state, reporting that Allison had gone missing after going for a walk around 10 p.m. the night before. When police arrived at Gerard's home, they noticed deep, curved scratches on his face, which he claimed he had sustained while shaving. Further examination revealed small red marks on his chest, which Gerard explained were from a moth bite he had encountered while changing an outdoor light. A search of the house revealed no signs of a disturbance. Everything was in order, and the bed was made. Despite his stress, Gerard appeared calm and began getting his daughters ready for school and daycare. Police interviewed Hannah, Sarah, and Ella, who reported falling asleep after their mother turned off the lights and had not seen her since. During questioning, the crying girls described their parents as a happy and generally harmonious couple. Police searched the area and spoke to neighbors, but no one witnessed anything unusual. The only initial clues found were a small bloodstain on Allison's car and a strand of her hair in the trunk. A large-scale search operation soon followed, with rescue teams and volunteers searching woods, wells, manholes, and dams near the Allison family home. To aid the search efforts, a mannequin was placed wearing an outfit similar to Allison's last known outfit to aid the search efforts. As time went on, the chances of finding Allison alive diminished. Her friends clung to hope, not wanting to think the worst. Gerard appeared visibly upset as he tearfully pleaded with his wife to return, in front of the media. Behind the scenes, however, he instructed his lover, Tony, to keep quiet and put their relationship on hold, promising to reunite in the future. 10 days after Allison went missing, a boater made a horrifying discovery on the banks of Colorado Creek, about 8 miles from the Allison family home, on April 30, 2012. The body was found in an advanced state of decomposition. The day after Allison's body was discovered, Gerard contacted his insurance company to inquire about filing an $800,000 life insurance claim on his wife. A medical examiner later formally identified the body as Allison Baden-Clay, 43, using dental records. Notably, Allison was still wearing the same clothes she had been wearing when she went missing. A post-mortem examination found that Allison's death was likely due to strangulation. Her death was therefore classified as a homicide, although determining the exact cause was difficult due to the advanced stage of decomposition of the body. On May 11, 2012, St. Paul's Cathedral in Brisbane held a funeral for Allison Baden-Clay, who had tragically passed away. Her husband, Gerard, was visibly overcome with emotion, crying throughout the service as he consoled his daughters and consoled Allison's parents. Hundreds of people attended the service. However, while Gerard was apparently mourning his wife's death, he was secretly communicating with his mistress, Tony, through public phone calls. He informed her of Allison's passing and urged her to keep their affair a secret from the police investigation. Meanwhile, the police began to question the story Gerard had given them. He claimed that Allison had gone for a walk around 10 p.m. and was gone when he woke up. However, conflicting evidence emerged. Police found that Gerard had charged his phone at 2 a.m. and was on his computer at 5 a.m., and forensic analysis showed that the marks on his cheeks were consistent with fingernail scratches. In addition, no blood was found on his razor. A biologist disputed Gerard's explanation of the caterpillar bites on his chest, stating that no caterpillars in the family's area could have caused such injuries. A separate expert examined Allison's hair and found 5 different types of leaves: eucalyptus, Chinese elm, myrtle, cat's claw vine, and herringbone fern. 2 of these, eucalyptus and Chinese elm, were found growing directly under the bridge where Allison's body was discovered. In addition, all 5 types of leaves and thorns were found in the Allison family's backyard. On June 13, 2012, a month after Allison's funeral, 41-year-old Gerard Baden-Clay was arrested and charged with his wife's murder. He maintained his innocence and claimed he would fight the charges and applied for bail, which was immediately denied due to concerns that he might flee. During the investigation, police spoke to Tony, who revealed their 4-year secret relationship to Gerard. It was also discovered that just days before Allison went missing, Gerard had sent Tony a letter promising to be with Tony on July 1st. Further complicating the case. The prosecution's theory was that Gerard had killed his wife, Allison, to collect life insurance money and pay off debts. They believed he also planned to move on with Tony McHugh. According to their theory, a fight broke out on the evening of April 19, 2012, while Gerard and Allison were watching TV after their daughters had gone to bed. During the argument, Allison allegedly scratched Gerard's cheek, leaving her fingernails to collect DNA evidence. Unfortunately, the DNA had degraded, making it impossible to determine its source. The prosecution claimed that Gerard strangled Allison, then dragged her body through the backyard, leaving her hair tangled with leaves. Gerard placed her body in the trunk of his car and drove to a nearby river, where he dumped her body under a bridge. The prosecution believed that Gerard thought the river would wash her body away, effectively covering up his crime. Gerard then allegedly returned home, charged his phone, cleaned the house, and reported Allison missing the next morning. After finding Allison's body, Gerard hired a criminal defense attorney and went to see him. During Gerard's 2014 murder trial for Allison, prosecutors were convinced that Gerard was guilty and argued that he had killed her. However, Gerard maintained that he had nothing to do with her death. He admitted that he and Allison had argued and suggested that she may have left the house late one night because she was depressed and may have taken her own life. However, Allison's family and friends rejected this idea. They were certain that Allison would never leave her daughters, as she loved them very much. Her friends had long spoken out against Gerard, describing him as arrogant, fake, and self-centered. They believed that Allison's deep love for him blinded her to these negative traits. During the trial, excerpts from Allison's diary were presented as evidence. The diary revealed how isolated she felt and how controlling Gerard was, especially after the birth of their first child. She described feeling trapped at home and detailed several instances of Gerard's controlling behavior. This included insulting her, monitoring her conversations with a baby monitor, controlling her finances, deleting relatives' contact details from her phone and blocking their calls. After Allison's death, Gerard's attempts to make an insurance claim were rejected, with the money being withheld until the trial was over. Another important testimony came from Melissa Romano, who had never met Gerard in person but had spoken to him on the phone in 2009 about a real estate deal. She testified that after the deal was finalized, Gerard called her out of the blue, suggesting, "I'm looking for someone to kill my wife." Melissa, stunned, questioned his motives, but Gerard abruptly redirected the conversation and ended the call. This testimony played a key role in the case against Gerard, which on July 15, 2014, Gerard Baden-Clay was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after serving 15 years. In 2015, Gerard appealed his conviction, and the court reclassified the crime to involuntary manslaughter, shortening his prison term. However, the decision sparked widespread outrage, with around 4,000 people demonstrating in support of Allison's family. In response to public sentiment, in 2016, Australia's High Court overturned the Court of Appeal's decision, reinstating the original murder conviction. As a result, Gerard will not be eligible for parole until at least 2027. During his incarceration, Gerard initially behaved like a model prisoner. However, over time, he adapted to prison life and became less restrained in his behavior, leading to an incident where he clashed with a prison guard, which resulted in a stern reprimand. Following Gerard Baden-Clay's trial, his former lover, Tony McHugh, moved to Bali, where she spent her time teaching and doing charity work. 4 years later, she moved to the United Arab Emirates to continue her education career. Toni now lives a private life, keeping her personal information private. She occasionally connects with friends on social media using a private account, as she fears that Gerard may try to find her after his release. In a recent public statement, Toni expressed remorse for her actions and clarified that she never intended to cause Allison any harm. Allison's daughters Hannah, Sarah, and Ella Baden-Clay are living with her parents. Allison's assets, including her insurance money, have been passed on to her children. After completing her university studies in 2022, Hannah has followed in her mother's footsteps by pursuing a career in dance. In memory of her sister Allison, Vanessa set up a charity to combat domestic violence and support those affected, while raising awareness of the issue. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Deborah Jeter. Deborah Jeter was born in 1976 in Georgia, USA. She was raised in a loving family and since childhood had a passion for helping people. When it came time to choose a career, Deborah decided to become a nurse without hesitation. She enrolled in a local college and pursued her nursing education. Alongside her studies, Deborah also focuses on building relationships. Deborah's boyfriend is a young man named Lester Jeter. They began a romantic relationship, and later both decided to move forward with married life. After marriage, they had 2 children. Their first child, named Kern, a year later, they had a second child. Because of their close age gap, the siblings were very close and did everything together. After graduating from college, Deborah to work part-time as an anatomy and physiology teacher. She also joined an exchange program as a licensed professional nurse. From an early age, Deborah's daughters began experiencing problems. Deborah often shows aggression towards her children and sometimes she has no control over her behavior. In 2004, she was accused of physically assaulting her eldest daughter, Kirsten, during a quarrel. However, this was the first and only incident of such behavior, so the charges were eventually dropped. As a result of this incident, Deborah was briefly hospitalized in a psychiatric facility and then underwent rehabilitation. She was diagnosed with several disorders, which were the cause of her depression. The experts concluded that Deborah's unusual behavior was linked to her mental disorders. The doctors reported that she managed to get these issues under control after receiving therapy. However, some of Deborah's neighbors believe she is still having difficulty controlling her behavior. Her frequent aggressive outbursts affected her husband and children, and she often acted impulsively. She would yell over anything, which was alarming. The situation seemed serious, as the police were repeatedly called to her house. However, every time the officers arrived, she would calm down. After the incident with Kirsten, Deborah avoided contact with the children. Each time, when the patrol officers would arrive, find nothing amiss, and leave after advising her to remain quiet and calm. Although there were numerous complaints about her loud and hot-tempered behavior, the officers felt powerless to intervene. This situation took a toll on her family, who bore the brunt of her aggression. Deborah's mental health issues seemed to get worse, leading to high tensions. Deborah's husband, Lester, struggled to endure the constant shouting and arguments. By 2009, the situation had become unbearable. In May, Lester decided to end the relationship and filed for divorce. Deborah was devastated. It seemed she genuinely loved her husband, but due to her mental health difficulty, so she was unable to control her behavior. Lester's decision to divorce was a significant shock for Deborah. She repeatedly tried to convince her husband to heal their relationship and discuss their issues. However, Lester was so frustrated with Deborah's behavior that he rejected any talks. Lester openly told his wife that their family had no future and he would never come back. He also mentioned that he intended not only to end the marriage but also to seek custody of the children. Lester was genuinely concerned that his wife might lose control when he wasn't around their daughters, fearing she might harm them. His worries were justified as Deborah's behavior became increasingly erratic. Lester worries about the safety and well-being of his two daughters, Kelsey and Kirsten, but he cannot predict the tragic fate that will befall them. That same month, after Lester declared his intention to divorce, Deborah attempted to end her life. She ingested a lethal dose of antidepressants, but was saved by the doctor's quick response. The most distressing aspect of this incident was that Deborah did this in front of her daughters, making her husband even more worried about her mental health. He feared that the stress of the divorce could worsen Deborah's illnesses. Unfortunately, resolving the legal issues of divorce is time-consuming, making the divorce process complicated and difficult. Nevertheless, Lester was determined to proceed with the divorce to protect the children from their unstable mother. Deborah's mental health issues clearly worsened after her divorce proceedings started. She and her children moved in with her mother. Naturally, Deborah suffered the most, but her frequent outbursts of anger and constant aggression also affected the children. Lester wanted to resolve all the issues quickly to minimize the trauma for the girls. Unfortunately, time was not on his side. Deborah attempted to end her life, which was a shock for the children. They couldn't understand their mother's behavior or the struggles she faced. Meanwhile, Deborah, at 30 years old, risked losing everything she had built with her husband over the years. Her world was falling apart, so it was no surprise that she was deeply shocked. Lester was determined to take action. He understood how serious Deborah's problems were and the danger she posed to herself and others. After Deborah's attempted to end her life, Lester insisted that her contact a psychiatric care center, believing she would receive professional help, an accurate diagnosis, and appropriate treatment there. Deborah took his advice and was admitted on May 22, which came as a great relief to Lester. During her treatment, the children stayed with their father, Lester. He also attempted to obtain a restraining order to keep the children away from their mother. During this time, Lester decided that he should seek full custody of both children. He believed Deborah was unable to control herself and tried his best to ensure the children's safety. Lester has repeatedly applied to court to limit Deborah's meeting in contact with the two girls Kirsten and Kelsey. It was expected that she would not be discharged from the hospital after just 2 weeks. Lester believes that such a short period of treatment was not enough for Deborah to control her behavior, so she remains a threat to her children. However, she was discharged on June 4. By this time, Deborah had not succeeded in gaining full custody despite her efforts. The judge denied issuing a restraining order to limit Deborah's communication with her daughters, considering it excessive. The judge believed the children were not in danger because she had received treatment. A temporary arrangement was made where Deborah would have custody of the children on weekends, while Lester would care for them on weekdays. The day after the custody hearing, on a Friday, June 5, 2009, Deborah planned to pick up the kids around 6 p.m. Although Lester doesn't want to be away from his daughters, he had to comply with the court orders. He had no choice but to hand the children over to Deborah when she arrived to take them for the weekend. Kirsten and Kelsey were happy to see their mother despite her previous rejections. Kirsten and Kelsey genuinely loved her, missed her, and enjoyed spending time with her when she was in a good mood. The eldest daughter, Kirsten, even posted on social media that she would see her mom the next day and expressed her excitement. However, they had no idea of the horrors that awaited. It seemed like a long-anticipated reunion, and Deborah was also eager to see her daughters. During a conversation with Lester, she mentioned that she had a big surprise planned for the children. In reality, a terrible plan had formed in Deborah's mind, which she intended to carry out. Instead of going home, Deborah drove with the children for a while and arrived at an abandoned house near Highway 77. It was a strange and eerie place to take the children. But the girls trusted their mother and followed her, eagerly anticipating the promised surprise. They were impatiently waiting for their mother to organize a special event for them. However, after they entered the house, Deborah pulled out a weapon. Kelsey quickly realized what was happening, but it was too late. She managed to shout to Kirsten to run away. However, Kirsten didn't listen. She charged at their mother, trying to take the knife to protect Kirsten. The struggle was unequal. Deborah stabbed her youngest daughter Kelsey several times. Kelsey was already down, and the eldest daughter Kirsten was desperately fighting with their mother. She pleaded for her to stop, shouting, "This is madness," but Deborah seemed oblivious, ignoring her pleas. Having dealt with Kelsey, Deborah turned on Kirsten, who tried to escape. Deborah struck her, but the wounds were not as deep. The girl began to bleed heavily. Despite this, she clung to life, begging her mother to stop and spare her. Kirsten expressed her desire to live, and perhaps this plea helped Deborah finally regain her senses. She halted the attack and began pacing nervously around the rooms of the abandoned house. In a state of shock, Deborah called the rescue service and confessed that she had killed her child, saying multiple times that she had done so and apologized for her actions. When asked for her location, she informed them that she was in an abandoned house on Highway 77 and mentioned that one of the children was still alive, urging them to hurry and call an ambulance to save the one who wasn't dead. The dispatcher inquired about her name, but Deborah refused to disclose it, stating that she would not reveal her identity. She was pacing around the house, while Kirsten was still alive and pleading for help. Deborah was overwhelmed and couldn't explain what had happened. She asked the dispatcher not to shoot her, stressing that she didn't have a gun. She gave precise directions to the location so law enforcement and medics could find the abandoned house where she had harmed Kirsten and Kelsey. Deborah said one of the girls was already dead, and the other was barely hanging on, as she had cut her throat and was bleeding. She urged them to arrive as quickly as possible, otherwise, the girls' chances of survival were slim. Deborah spoke calmly to the dispatcher, despite being a bit excited. Her voice was generally calm and cold. The dispatcher found Deborah's behavior strange and began to suspect that she had no control over the situation. While waiting for law enforcement, Deborah alternated between calmness and shouting nervously, even insulting the dispatcher. The operator remained composed, continuing the conversation to prevent Deborah from doing anything reckless. Deborah mentioned that if they didn't hurry, she might lose control and harm her second child. She said this completely calmly and without any emotion. The dispatcher realized the situation was extremely serious and that Deborah was unstable. Deborah, who had mental health issues, spoke about her daughters as if they were objects, one whom she has eliminated from her life, while the other is in danger. However, this did not particularly bother Deborah, as she was mainly concerned about her own safety. Deborah repeatedly asked the dispatcher to ensure that the police wouldn't shoot her when they arrived. Although she understood the seriousness of the crime, her focus was on her own well-being, even though one of her daughters is dead, and the other daughter is barely alive. This thing was inconsistent with recent when she tried to end her life, which occurred shortly before the tragedy. However, Deborah clearly did not want to suffer. But is she ready to take responsibility for her actions? The police arrived at the scene and found Deborah on the street, still talking on the phone. She raised her hands to show she had dropped the knife and was unarmed. She repeatedly told the officers not to shoot her, insisting she had no weapons, was not dangerous, and would not attack. Deborah directed the police to an abandoned house where 2 bloody bodies were found inside. Although Deborah was a nurse, she did not attempt to help the children. While speaking to the dispatcher, she walked around the abandoned house and then went outside to avoid seeing the girls' bodies. Deborah wandered around the courtyard while Kirsten sat in blood next to her dead younger sister, Kelsey. Deborah's car was in the garage of the abandoned house, with a small knife on the car roof, the same knife she used to commit the massacre. The police quickly found the knife and arrested Deborah, placing her under constant surveillance due to concerns she might try to harm herself. Inside the abandoned building, officers encountered a horrifying scene. They discovered two girls. One of them, Kelsey, was in the bathroom, covered in blood. Because of her injuries, she died at that moment, having bled out in less than a minute. Kelsey was only 12 years old, and her mother had stabbed her with such force that she succumbed to the bleeding almost instantly. It's hard to imagine what Kirsten went through. She was found with similar injuries in the bedroom, but was still alive when rescuers arrived. Kirsten lay in a pool of her own blood, her eyes indifferent, indicating she had lost a big amount of blood. Quick action was crucial to save her life. Her throat was cut from right to left, damaging her airways and one of the main arteries. Surprisingly, her mother, Deborah, a nurse, attempted to clamp the wound to stop the bleeding while waiting for the medics. This may increase her chances of survival. In an emergency situation, the doctors rushed Kirsten out of the abandoned house and took her to Parkland Hospital in Dallas. They performed an emergency operation and battled to save her life for hours. Miraculously, the girl survived. After 4 days, Kirsten was moved from intensive care to a regular ward. Her recovery was incredible, especially since it was initially thought she wouldn't make it. However, her challenges were far from over. Though she narrowly escaped death, a more troubling fact was that she and her sister were found in that abandoned house, having been attacked by their own mother. It's hard to comprehend the extent of the post-traumatic shock Kirsten experienced. During the summer, she was recovering from the operation, trying to come to terms with the fact that her younger sister Kelsey is dead and the fact that her mother was a murderer. At the time of the crime, Deborah lived with her mother in the small town of Malacca, Texas, which had a population of just 2,000 people. Investigators reviewed Deborah's cell phone records and discovered that after taking the children from their father, Deborah headed to Malakoff. There, she seemed to wander along the roads for a while, then she eventually stopping the abandoned house. Detectives believe Deborah was searching for a place to harm the children. Examining the actions of people with mental disorders is difficult, yet the incident in the abandoned house provides disturbing things into Deborah's motives. When life falls apart, depression and mental issues can lead some women to feel that ending their lives is the only option. In many cases, they kill their children first, believing it to be a merciful act. Under the strain of mental illness, a mother may think that her family's collapse will doom her children to endless suffering. In this mindset, she views murder as a way to free them from pain and hardship. Often, these women then take their own lives. In this situation, it's evident that Deborah had no intention of dying. She was frightened and did not harm herself, even fearing that the police might shoot her, showing that she valued her life. The murders of Kirsten and Kelsey were clearly motivated by revenge, intended to hurt Lester extreme pain. She aimed to deliver a cunning and cruel blow to him. The incident was truly alarming. Kirsten and Kelsey's father, Lester, tried to give this case a big push to draw attention to the trial, literally the day after the judge refused to issue a restraining order against Deborah. Instead, the judge agreed at the hearing that she would have custody of her daughter by the end of the week. This decision later raised many questions about whether the judge considered this decision reckless. Unfortunately, Lester's worst fears were confirmed. Deborah killed Kelsey and almost took the life of Kirsten. Lester tried his best to convince the judge that his daughters were in mortal danger. Under no circumstances were they allowed to see Deborah unsupervised. However, the judge maintained that their main goal is to strengthen and unite families, encourage parents to cooperate with each other, to ensure children receive love from both parents. This decision ultimately led to devastating consequences, but the judge's actions were still deemed legal despite the tragedy that followed. The district attorney stated that it's not fair to blame only the judge for this situation. According to him, responsibility belongs to many parties: the doctors who allowed Deborah to leave the hospital, Lester, along with Deborah. Deborah was expected to face severe punishment due to her past actions. She had previously shown anger and aggression towards her children, including attempting to harm Kirsten. However, the decision to lift the prohibition order on her is still controversial and raises many questions. Generally, in 99% of cases, shared custody benefits children, allowing both parents to support, love, and communicate with them, fostering healthy development. Yet, this approach fails when a parent has serious mental health issues. Child Protection Services claim they were unaware of Deborah's behavior. Staff stated that if they had known about her try to end her life in front of the children, she would never have been allowed unsupervised contact. From that point on, people also focused on the possibility that the family had clearly become victims of leniency on the part of the mental hospital and the justice system. However, this could not be proven. It was known that Deborah had been in and out of such institutions multiple times, with discharges that came too soon. A comprehensive diagnosis typically requires at least 3 months of testing and observation. Treatment and medication may be prescribed based on test results, but their effectiveness is not guaranteed. Doctors then closely monitor the patient's condition, behavioral changes, and the progression of the disease, adjusting medication as needed. This process can take up to a month. And discharge is only considered after a stable improvement in the patient's condition. However, Deborah was released after just a few weeks, suggesting that she did not undergo the full range of required examinations and tests. Deborah promised Lester that she would take Kirsten and Kelsey out and give them a surprise. She wanted to plan a fun evening with activities like singing and reading. However, just 4 hours later, she called emergency services and confessed to killing her children. Her trial lasted a year, and on May 27, 2010, Deborah Jeter was formally charged with aggravated murder and attempted murder. Throughout the proceedings, Deborah was held in prison due to the high bail, which was unaffordable and reflected the severity of the crime. As a result, she remained behind bars until the start of her trial. Deborah's defense team proposed a deal to the prosecution due to the complexity and sensitive nature of the case. Prosecutors fear that Deborah's mental illness could lead to her being released without jail time. Furthermore, a full trial would require Kirsten, Deborah's daughter who had miraculously survived her mother's attack, to testify in court. To spare Kirsten the trauma of reliving the horrific incident, Deborah agreed to plead guilty to a lesser charge, hoping to avoid the death penalty under Texas law. About a year after the murder, Lester and Kirsten visited Deborah in prison. Deborah explained that, due to the turmoil in her life at the time, so she genuinely believed killing her youngest daughter Kelsey was the only way to protect her children from future suffering. She thought that the family's breakup would cause everyone immense pain and, in her mentally unstable state, she saw the murder as the only solution, a twisted form of salvation. Deborah expressed regret about what happened, but she admitted that she still hates Lester and blames him for the tragedy, and she will never forgive him. Kirsten reminisced warmly about the past with her mother. They talked calmly and even laughed together. This was the last time Deborah could peacefully meet with her loved ones. Afterward, she was moved to another prison and sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. In her situation, this is seen as a lenient punishment because, without admitting guilt, she could have faced the death penalty. Lester was deeply shocked by the incidents, but inspired by his daughter, he decided to move forward. In 2015, he rebuilt his life, remarried, and he and Kirsten removed their social media profiles. Eventually, Kirsten reactivated her account but set it to private. Hello, crime enthusiasts, are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Kathy Krausnack. On February 19, 1982, police were called to the Krausnack family home, where they discovered the body of 29-year-old Kathy Krausnack. An axe was found embedded in her head, the only fatal wound. Earlier, Kathy's 30-year-old husband, James Krausnack, had run into a neighbor's house while holding their 3-year-old daughter. He was covered in blood and appeared distressed, reporting that his wife showed no signs of life. While crying and agitated, he waited for police to arrive. James told police that he had left for work at Kodak around 6:30 a.m., where he worked as an economist. He spent the day completing routine tasks while his wife, Kathy, and their daughter, Sarah, were still asleep at home. Kathy had planned to spend the day with their daughter. When James returned home around 5 p.m., he noticed the garage door open, the kitchen window broken, and the glass door between the garage and the house shattered. Realizing something was wrong, he went inside and found his wife lying on the bed. He was shocked and momentarily unable to speak. He then noticed his 3-year-old daughter lying next to the bed, unharmed. To ensure her safety, James took his daughter to a neighbor's house. The neighbor opened the door and saw James, who was frightened and crying. At his request, she called 911, asking them to come quickly because he claimed there had been a murder. Police spoke to Sarah, who seemed unaware of what had happened. She said she saw a multicolored bad guy on her parents' bed and saw her mother with blood on her face. It is extremely distressing for a child to be left alone in an apartment with a murdered mother for an entire day. This was a disturbing aspect of the case. Fortunately, Sarah was too young to fully understand the situation, so it did not affect her mental state much. The neighbors did not observe or hear anything unusual. The police investigated the crime scene but did not find any significant evidence or clues. The murder weapon, an axe, was taken from Kathy's family garage. It had been used to cut the grass. Notably, there were no fingerprints on the axe, suggesting that it had been deliberately cleaned. In addition, forensic experts found no fingerprints inside the house, which was puzzling since 3 people lived there and could have touched many objects. The police found this strange and assumed that the perpetrator had cleaned the entire house. However, the police did notice something strange in the kitchen. A damp bathroom rug was drying in the garage. James claimed that he had no idea why the rug was there and that nothing of note had been found on it. In 1982, forensic techniques did not allow for the collection or analysis of DNA. Police suspected that the incident was a botched robbery, theorizing that the attackers may have become frightened and decided to eliminate Kathy, a potential witness. However, some valuables were still intact. Kathy's bag, which had been left in the kitchen, had been emptied onto the floor, but the contents, money, jewelry, and expensive tea sets, were all there and neatly arranged. This raised an important question: why did the criminals leave these items behind? Even the cash that was openly left on the dresser had not been taken. Perhaps the criminal had scared Kathy, but in this case, fingerprints would have been left on these items. Yet, there were none, which was puzzling. This behavior was unusual, and the police noticed these discrepancies, raising suspicions that the crime scene had been staged. Some items were arranged in a way that suggested they were deliberately placed there. A crucial reason for dismissing robbery as a motive was that nothing had been stolen. Seasoned police officers, who regularly dealt with burglaries, immediately recognized that this incident was different. While murders were rare in Brighton, thefts and robberies occurred almost daily. Police believed that Kathy's death was a premeditated murder. The initial suspect was, of course, her husband, who discovered her body. Police began investigating James. James's friends and acquaintances described them as a happy, even idealistic couple. They had both grown up in the same Michigan city, Kathy came from a family of truck drivers, while James's parents owned a successful carpet store. They met in high school and began dating in college, eventually marrying on May 3, 1974. After their marriage, Kathy continued her studies in economics in Colorado, and in 1978, they celebrated the birth of their daughter, Sarah. Meanwhile, James became interested in further education and pursued a doctorate in economics. James then took a teaching position at the University of Lynchburg in Virginia. In 1981, the family relocated to Brighton, New York, where James found a job as an economist. Kathy was a devoted and caring mother to their daughter, always attentive and loving. However, friends noticed a significant change in Kathy's mood 6 months before her death. She became unusually irritable and restless, though they did not know the reasons behind her behavior. As the police investigated the family's situation, they discovered that things were not as perfect as they initially appeared. The couple kept their problems private, never discussing their issues publicly or seeking advice from others, which made it difficult to gather information. However, police found a brochure for marriage counseling in the family car, suggesting that there had been ongoing discord in their relationship. The police also contacted James's employer and learned that he had misrepresented his qualifications, claiming to have a doctorate. This deception led to him being assigned a role he was unqualified for, resulting in stress at work and further complicating his situation. James's cooperation helped the police gather information, and James agreed to attend the next meeting for questioning, but he did not attend. Less than 24 hours after the murder, he left the city without informing the police. This action of his made the police suspicious. He was intentionally fleeing. Police later discovered that James had gone to his parents' home in Michigan. They found him again and questioned him. He cooperated with the police by providing blood and hair samples for analysis. Unfortunately, DNA testing was not available at the time, so this did not yield any useful results. 10 days after Kathy was found dead in her bed, James hired a lawyer. The police did not have enough evidence to bring any charges in 1982. Police focused on information that James had left for work at 6:30 a.m. It was important to verify this detail and determine whether he could have been home at the time of the murder. Forensic examinations showed that Kathy had died in her sleep between 4:30 and 7:30 a.m., meaning she could have been murdered with an axe shortly after James left for work. While it was possible that the husband had committed the crime before leaving, it was difficult to understand why he would do so and then go to work, leaving their 3-year-old daughter behind. The mother's body remained in the house throughout the day. The investigation stalled. The evidence collected and the documents found did not shed light on the events of that morning. The James had no clear motive, making a jury trial unlikely. If the prosecution lost, they would not be able to bring new charges against him. In 1997, James met his old friend Sharon at a trade show. Their relationship quickly blossomed, and James asked her out, which she accepted. Sharon noticed that James was still deeply affected by his past loss. He seemed shocked by the traumatic event. James shared the basics of that terrible day with Sharon but avoided going into detail, and Sharon did not want to press him for more information. Their mutual understanding helped strengthen their relationship, and they later married. In 1999, they moved to another city, then moved across the country. At the same time, police continued their efforts on Kathy's case. New police re-examined the evidence, leading to the analysis of a large number of items related to the case. The police were committed to finding justice for the woman who had been so brutally murdered. In 2015, the FBI assisted Brighton police in their investigation, which led them to focus on a suspect, Kathy's husband, James. On April 16, 2016, 34 years after the murder, police made a surprise visit to James's home, hoping to meet him and possibly uncover inconsistencies in his previous statements. However, their plan did not go as planned. James appeared calm and welcoming. He chatted with the officers, agreed to have the conversation recorded, and did not request an attorney. They talked for an hour at the kitchen table, but James remained calm throughout the conversation. Eventually, one of the police asked him directly if he had anything to do with his wife's death. James was angry, said that he would never hurt his wife. Sharon defended him, saying that in all the time they were together, she had never witnessed any aggressive behavior from him. He was a caring and loving husband who would never lay a hand on her. She firmly believed that he was incapable of such cruelty. Sharon also participated in the police interrogation. Throughout the interrogation, she never doubted her husband's innocence. She felt that she had seen his sincere heart and kind nature over the years. Although her views seemed naive, she held these beliefs deeply. She never asked about the fate of James' ex-wife, as she was satisfied with the brief explanation he gave at the beginning of their relationship and never mentioned it again. Police found themselves at a dead end once again, prompting the decision to review all the evidence collected for DNA testing nearly 40 years after the crime. The murder weapon, an axe found in the victim's head, was sent to the FBI for analysis. Unfortunately, they were unable to locate any usable DNA on it because it had been tampered with. This was a significant setback. The police then sought to determine when the crime had occurred. One of the United States' leading forensic experts, Michael Baden, analyzed all the available information about the body. He concluded that the woman had likely died around 3:30 a.m., based on her body temperature and the amount of undigested food in her stomach. Therefore, when James arrived at work at 6:30 a.m., he would have definitely noticed that something was wrong. Police were skeptical of the idea of a botched robbery because nothing was taken. They questioned why the robbers would kill a woman who was sleeping and did not witness the robbery. This conflict led to the filing of murder charges. On November 8, 2019, James was arrested after being charged, but the 67-year-old did not confess to the crime. Police used the time of death to investigate a murder that had occurred 40 years earlier. They found evidence that a robbery had been staged. With this information, law enforcement and James presented their case to the jury, focusing on James' alleged involvement in the murder of Kathy Krausnack, his first wife. During the police, investigators discovered a dangerous criminal named Edla Rabbi, who lived about a mile and a half from Kathy's home in 1982. Rabbi was notorious for his harmful taste in women. Despite being arrested several times, Rabbi often received light sentences and served a total of more than 32 years in prison before his death in 2014. He confessed to killing Kathy but gave many inaccurate details, leading to skepticism about his claims. After each time in custody, he hunted for new victims, torturing them. His first confirmed murder occurred in 1991 when he strangled a 27-year-old woman named Stephanie Kupczynski. Although he confessed to the crime in 2012, he maintained that he had no intention of killing her and that the situation had spiraled out of control. Shortly before Kathy's murder, Rabbi had been released from prison in the 1980s. He was questioned and the investigation began but was not considered a likely suspect. Police questioned him briefly and then released him. As a result, James's lawyers claimed the police were negligent. Instead of pursuing the real killer, they chose to blame the grieving husband, James, who they considered the prime suspect. This situation had a significant impact on society. It was revealed that not only was the criminal dead by the time the case was revisited, but the police who investigated it in the 1980s were also deceased, meaning they could not be held accountable for any mistakes. During the original police, the police had only spoken to the murderer once and then disregarded him entirely. Since Edla Rabbi had passed away, he could not be questioned to clarify his role in the case. Nevertheless, many involved in the investigation still questioned whether he was connected to Kathy's murder. Although he confessed to killing Kathy before his death, numerous inconsistencies arose in his account, particularly regarding the handwriting, which did not resemble his at all. This conclusion was reached by all the experts who examined his case. First, he had a history of rape rather than robbery, yet no signs of sexual assault were found. Additionally, the murder weapon, an axe, was not typical of his methods, and the handwriting was evidently different. As a result, police did not consider him a suspect. Years ago, the prosecution was leaning towards the theory that Kathy's husband was her killer rather than a nearby maniac. During the trial, the prosecutor presented the time of death as crucial evidence. However, several defense experts disagreed with the assertion that Kathy died early, with most believing it occurred before 6:30 in the morning. It is believed that Kathy died at 6:30 a.m. after her husband left for work. The investigation was complicated by the fact that Kathy was under an electric blanket, and it was unclear whether it was on or off at the time of her death. If it was on, the temperature it reached was unknown. Experts attempted to estimate the time of death by analyzing the drop in body temperature. Ultimately, there is no reliable method for determining the exact time of death. Experts have differed, resulting in a margin of error of several hours. Another piece of evidence cited by the police was a shoe imprint found pressing down on a garbage bag at the crime scene. This imprint resembled the shoes worn by Kathy's husband, who was absent at the time of her death. However, this evidence alone was not enough to establish his guilt. The prosecutor argued that the husband was the only possible suspect because he had a motive stemming from family issues. After lengthy deliberations at the hearing, the verdict was announced in court. The jury were unanimous in only one opinion, that the crime was too confusing and contradictory, and the evidence too dubious and easily dismissed. Despite this, James Krausnack was convicted of second-degree murder in November 2022 and sentenced to 25 years in prison. The verdict came as a shock to many, especially to those close to James who knew him well. They had remained certain that James was not guilty because there was no serious evidence of his involvement. James himself also asserted his innocence. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Vashti Sekat. At approximately 4 a.m. on April 30th, 2011, Brett Sekat called 911 for assistance. He informed the police that his wife had taken her own life and that she had also set fire to their house. Their two young sons, aged 2 and 4, were asleep in their bedroom at the time of the incident. Brett was able to save them but wanted to go back into the burning house to rescue his wife. The police advised him to stay where he was and not to go back inside because of the fire, and instructed him to keep an eye on the children. The police were then dispatched to their location. When firefighters arrived at the home and extinguished the fire, they discovered a woman dead. Her body was lying on the left side of the bed, with her arms and legs bent. In a state of anguish, Brett described what had happened in more detail. He explained that his wife, 34-year-old Vashti, had called him to help while he was sleeping on the couch on the first floor. He told her to take their children from the second-floor nursery and bring them down. She followed his instructions in a semi-conscious state. He believed his wife was unwell and that their children in the next room were disturbing her. Suddenly, he heard a loud slamming of the bedroom door, followed by flames coming from upstairs. Worried by the strange noises, he went upstairs to check on her and found his wife unconscious on the bed, bleeding. He held her tightly, but she was unresponsive. When he tried to lift her up to get her out, the flames around them made it impossible. Brett decided to prioritize saving the children. He went downstairs, got his sons out of the house, and put them in a car for safety before calling 911. He suspected his wife had set fire to the bed and shot herself while he was on the phone. Ignoring police warnings, he went back into the house to save her. Covering his face with a wet towel, he carefully moved into the smoky darkness, but the flames forced him to retreat. He believed his wife suffered from depression and dark thoughts, which may have led her to set herself on fire. He felt guilty for not being able to help her, but he was unclear about her motives for these tragic events. Despite her troubling thoughts, she was primarily concerned about her children's safety. This concern led her to ask her husband to take them away before she took her own life. However, the reason for starting a fire afterward remains unclear, and no one seems to have an answer. When police examined the scene, they discovered several intriguing details. They found a canister of gasoline next to the bed, suggesting that the fire was deliberately set. The position of the gun raised several questions. It was found under Vashti's body with the barrel pointing downward, which made it unlikely that she could have shot herself in that way. Police searched through her purse and discovered a note listing various expenses. The first item on the list was funeral, with an amount of $15,000 next to it. Other expenses included a mortgage, a car, and education, all categorized as life insurance. This suggests that the Vashti may have planned for her death and specified which expenses her life insurance would cover. On the passenger seat of Vashti's car, her notebook was located. Inside, there was a handwritten note filled with distressing messages. "She can't do this. She can't fight this. Take care of our boys. Be nice to Brendan. Talk to Bronson and support them both, letting them know that Mommy loves them. Every night I take care of Bronson is so wonderful. Mommy is so proud of you. Be a good big brother, Brendan. Stay strong and never lose that smile. I love you both and will watch over you from heaven." Neighbors shared some details about the situation. One neighbor, who couldn't sleep that night and was watching TV, reported hearing gunshots around 3:15 a.m. She noted that Brett didn't call 911 until 3:57 a.m., which raised questions about why he waited 42 minutes to seek help. Vashti's body was sent for an autopsy. A forensic pathologist determined that the cause of death was a gunshot wound to the head and confirmed that her death was not due to fire or smoke, as these occurred later. She had additional gunshot wounds to her chest and thighs. A toxicology report found no signs of alcohol or illegal substances in her system. A few days after Vashti's death, a funeral was held in front of the house where the fire had started. Family, friends, and local residents attended the ceremony. While Vashti's loved ones reflected on her life, her siblings, Kathleen and Rich, harbored doubts about what had really happened. They suspected Brett, and Kathleen quickly dismissed Brett's explanation as improbable. Kathleen, Rich, and Vashti lived in different states but remained close, frequently calling and visiting each other. Their loved ones were aware of the issues and conflicts in Vashti's marriage. Brett's comments after his wife's death were shocking. A large portrait of Vashti hung over the fireplace in their home. When her sister approached the photo to offer her condolences, Brett looked at Kathleen with irritation and expressed that he didn't want to discuss his wife. This response surprised the family members. Upon hearing about Vashti's death, her brother and sister contacted the county sheriff, insisting that she could not have taken her own life. They urged the police to treat the case as a potential murder and conduct a thorough investigation. The Rich and Kathleen closely observed the Brett's actions and shared valuable information with the police. By this point, the police, who sensed something was seriously wrong with the case, had begun to look more deeply into the lives of the Brett and Vashti. They appeared to be a happy couple who had been together for many years. They started dating in school, where Vashti was known as the school beauty and Brett was a promising athlete excelling in wrestling. They were very much in love and got married after a few years of dating. The couple held their wedding in Belize in 2004 and later settled in Brett's hometown of Kingman, Kansas, a small, friendly town with a population of just 3,000. There, they bought a house and started a family, welcoming 2 sons. At the time of the tragedy, their eldest son, Brendan, was 4 years old, and their youngest, Bronson, was 2. Friends and neighbors viewed the family as exemplary, unaware of the issues they faced behind the closed doors of the family. Brett often praised his wife to friends, yet he had concerns about her excessive dedication to her job in the HR department of an advertising agency. She frequently worked late, which bothered him. He struggled to understand why she felt the need to work so much, especially since he earned a decent income as a police academy instructor and could support the family comfortably. In contrast, Vashti valued her independence and wanted to help with the family finances. She was successful in her career and truly enjoyed her work. Brett believed that Vashti's emotional struggles were heavily influenced by her work-related fatigue. She was experiencing burnout and depression, feeling that life had lost its meaning. It was revealed that her boss had been concerned about her health prior to the tragedy and discovered she had hormonal imbalances. Vashti was prescribed hormonal supplements intended to help her lose weight naturally. But these medications have side effects, including fatigue, irritability, and anxiety, which may have contributed to her depression. Vashti's relatives said she suffered from depression. She had recently started seeing a psychologist, and after November 2010, she and her husband began attending family counseling to address the problems in their troubled marriage. Vashti had changed a lot. Previously a cheerful and sociable leader, she had become withdrawn and sad. It is possible that her emotional state contributed to her decision to end her life. However, new developments soon came to light. As her marriage struggled, she considered divorcing Brett. Family counseling sessions were ineffective and their list of grievances only grew longer. Frequent arguments took place, pushing their relationship to the brink of collapse. Vashti's relatives said that she often spent time alone and sometimes went out with friends just to avoid being at home and seeing Brett. Despite this, she and Brett continued to attend family counseling, and she also had separate sessions with the same therapist. However, Vashti's relatives could not accept that she would choose to die. They believed that she loved life, her children, and her family too much to take such a drastic step. Although there were challenges in the marriage and feelings of depression, they were not overwhelming. Additionally, they found it hard to believe that she could have started a fire in the house, putting her young children's lives at risk and leaving them without shelter. This idea seemed illogical to them. How could a loving and caring mother do something like that to her sons? Relatives shared that she would wake up every morning at 4 o'clock to prepare nutritious breakfasts for her children. She avoided store-bought baby food, choosing instead to make her own purees from fresh vegetables and cook wholesome porridge for them. When she learned that a boy in kindergarten had been diagnosed with cancer, she took it upon herself to support his family by raising funds for his treatment. She baked pancakes, sold them, and donated the proceeds to the boy's family. Everyone around her was convinced that such a mother would never abandon her children. Police considered both accounts of the incident. They considered the possibility that Brett might have been involved in the case. Police reviewed Brett's call. When they called 911, they found that Brett's voice sounded cold, emotionless, and distant, which gave the police the impression that he didn't care. According to the investigation, the police discovered that Brett isolated Vashti and the children from relatives and friends, limited communication, and considered his wife and children as his property. Vashti could only talk to family and friends when he was at work. Otherwise, he would get angry if anyone called her in his presence. The Brett exerted complete control over his family. The Kathleen described Brett as a narcissist and an abuser. He was strict not only with his wife but also with his sons. The Brett believed that even at a young age, boys needed to be treated harshly to become strong men. He never allowed his children to show weakness and often resorted to physical punishment. Brett trained them from an early age and taught them to fight. His harsh parenting methods caused tension within the family, contributing to the breakdown of the marriage. Finally, Vashti felt it was time to leave. A few days before the tragedy, Vashti met with a lawyer and filed for divorce. She wanted custody of the children but was open to them spending weekends with their father under her supervision. Although she was sad about the divorce, she would be free from Brett's control for a long time. He had been controlling her since the beginning of their relationship. Vashti had big plans for her future, including a trip to Hawaii with her sister, tickets to a concert of her favorite band, and other travel plans. Without Brett by her side, she took charge of her life, focusing on healthy eating, exercise, and weight loss. She is in great shape and happy with the positive changes she has made. She recently went shopping with Kathleen and bought a lot of beautiful new clothes, which were still in the bags and with the tags still on at the time of the fire. She hasn't even had a chance to wear them. Those who knew Vashti sensed that something was off. It seemed impossible for her to abandon all her plans so suddenly. Despite feeling depressed, she remained excited and determined to move forward. However, she was unaware that her plans would never come to fruition. Just days before her tragic death, she served Brett with divorce papers, which infuriated him. Shortly after, she passed away. Could this have been mere coincidence? If she was indeed planning a divorce and preparing for a new chapter in her life while intending to raise her children alone, why would she choose to leave this world and abandon her beloved sons? This raised serious concerns for the police. The Kathleen informed police that Brett had consistently threatened his wife with violence and a lengthy divorce process. He had even warned her that he would take their children away if she decided to leave him. Out of fear, Vashti had put up with his behavior for a long time, but she could no longer tolerate living with her abusive husband and wanted to end their marriage as soon as possible. When Brett learned of the impending divorce, he was devastated and canceled a planned vacation with friends. He believed that threatening Vashti with taking away their children was the best way to win her back. He made it clear to her that he would do everything in his power to ensure she never saw her sons again, even if it meant moving them out of the country. This left Vashti very scared. That night, after receiving threats from Brett, she went to visit a friend. She then took the children away so that Brett would have time to think about where he was going. She believed that when she and the children returned, Brett would decide to leave and would not bother her with the children anymore. However, Brett had no intention of leaving. Instead, he was planning something. A few days later, Brett convinced Vashti to talk to him. He tearfully confessed to her that he wanted her to come back and asked for a chance to see the children he missed so much. When she asked why he hadn't moved yet, he replied that he had nowhere to go and asked to stay until he found a new place to live. Vashti was moved by Brett's words. Therefore, she returned home with Brett in the morning, but died that night. Police interviewed a therapist to learn more about the couple's relationship. The therapist revealed that Vashti had recently confided in her about threats from her husband, Brett. Just days before the tragedy, Brett had told Vashti about a dream he had in which he killed her, and he had promised that as a police officer, he could make it look like an accident or that she had left voluntarily. The therapist described Brett as a narcissist with latent psychopathic traits. In that situation, the therapist feared that Brett might harm his wife, and could not accept that Vashti would choose to end her own life. The therapist thought Vashti was too religious to do such a thing and believed that she would never abandon her children to their abusive father. Brett was called in for questioning and was asked directly if he had anything to do with his wife's death. He firmly denied any involvement and expressed that Vashti's death had shocked him deeply. He explained that he was struggling to cope, as he was now alone with their children and unsure how to live without his beloved wife. Brett acknowledged that their relationship had faced difficulties. The night before the tragedy, they had discussed their future plans and the possibility of dividing their assets in case of a divorce. He noted that Vashti had been very depressed, and he suggested that their conversation may have caused her to be so distressed that she chose to end her life. He felt guilty, believing that he may have hurt her, which may have contributed to her tragic decision. When asked about threats to Vashti's life, Brett claimed it was just a joke. He admitted that he tried to intimidate her to avoid a divorce, but insisted he would never harm her. When questioned about what might motivate Vashti to set their house on fire, he said she disliked it because they couldn't afford necessary repairs. Throughout the interrogation, Brett acted disrespectfully and aggressively, expressing anger over being questioned about his wife's death. He stated that it was her choice to end her life and that he was in no way responsible for it. Brett's account of the fire and his actions during the time do not match. He said he rushed into the burning room and hugged his bleeding wife in an attempt to save her. However, there was no blood on his clothes or body, and he showed no signs of burns, despite being in the middle of the fire. Shirtless, barefoot, and wearing only pants. It is unlikely that he would not have suffered blisters or singed hair, especially since he walked barefoot through the flames. This suggests that he never actually entered the burning room and was not being truthful about his account. Police suspected Brett of being involved in the crime, but they needed more evidence to arrest him and file charges, so they continued their investigation. Brett's pants, which he was wearing at the time of the fire, were taken for analysis. Tests showed traces of gasoline on the pants, indicating that he likely started the fire. A forensic expert confirmed that Vashti died when the house burned down, contradicting Brett's claim that she started the fire. Firefighters found multiple fires on the second floor of the home, indicating that someone had deliberately set the fire to destroy evidence of the crime. Police discovered that Brett had spent 40 minutes before calling 911, during which time he had taken steps to destroy any evidence. Investigations of his home computer and phone revealed numerous internet searches for how to destroy evidence before the incident. Forensic examinations from Podcherkesk revealed that the notes Vashti left behind were forgeries. The letters were slanted in the opposite direction and the handwriting did not match Vashti's. It is likely that her husband tried to imitate her handwriting but did not do a good job, possibly in a hurry. The test showed that the shot was fired from a point where Vashti could not have shot herself. There were no gunpowder burns on her body. Brett was not initially suspected of murder, so police did not test his hands for gunpowder residue. All the evidence pointed to Brett, and on May 14, 2011, he was arrested. He faces charges of murder, arson, and endangering the lives of children. The trial began only 2 years later. The prosecution presented clear evidence of Brett's guilt. The position of the gun did not match the circumstances. If Vashti had shot herself while lying down, the gun would have been on the floor. If she had shot herself while sitting, the gun should have been to her right side. Instead, it was found under her body with the muzzle pointing down, which was impossible. The bullet's trajectory was also questionable. Achieving that trajectory would require her to bend her arm almost completely and hold it away from her body. The lack of soot and smoke in Vashti's respiratory system and blood indicates that she was dead when a fire started, suggesting that someone else started the fire. During the trial, experts in handwriting, ballistics, and forensic science provided their testimony. There were no witnesses from the defense present in court. Brett denied all allegations, and his lawyer attempted to dispute the evidence linking him to the crime. The prosecution argued that Vashti's bedroom was where the crime took place. Brett shot her and then set fire to parts of the house. He got the children out to safety and called 911 from the second floor. The prosecution believed that the motive behind the crime was his refusal to get a divorce and share custody of the children. The jury deliberated for 5 hours. Brett Seacat, 37, was convicted on all counts, including first-degree murder, and Brett was sentenced to life in prison, plus 6 years and 3 months, for arson and endangering the lives of children. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Molly Tibbetts. Molly Tibbetts was a vibrant young woman born in San Francisco on May 8, 1998, to Rob and Laura Tibbetts. She had 2 brothers, Jake and Scott. Molly was fortunate to grow up with loving parents and began to excel in school shortly after starting 2nd grade. Life presented Molly with an unexpected challenge. Things were going well for her and her parents until they decided to divorce. In 2007, Molly moved to Brooklyn, Iowa, with her mother and brother. Brooklyn was her mother's hometown, and Molly now had the opportunity to experience her teenage years in this quiet town. The move was difficult for Scott, Jake, and Molly, but their caring parents provided essential support. Their father, Rob, maintained a close relationship with his children. Although he couldn't be there all the time, he was determined to do everything he could to help them. Brooklyn is a small town with a population of only 1,400. Life there is calm, a stark contrast to the hustle and bustle of San Francisco. Molly and her 2 brothers have adapted perfectly to their new home. Molly plans to continue her studies at Brooklyn College. She is a sociable person who makes many friends. Molly is smart, energetic, positive, and cheerful. In 2015, Molly met a senior named Dalton Jack at her Brooklyn school, and she instantly liked him. This encounter took place on a chilly October evening while Dalton and his friend were sitting in a pickup truck after playing football. A few younger students approached them, including Molly. Dalton was immediately taken with her. She made him laugh and he found her beautiful. They exchanged phone numbers and soon began having lunch together and going to the movies. From that point on, they fell in love and Dalton considering her his everything. Molly and Dalton's love for each other deepened over time. 2 years later, when Molly moved from Brooklyn to study psychology at the University of Iowa, she maintained her relationship with Dalton. While she was in Iowa, Dalton stayed in Brooklyn to pursue a career in construction, but this did not affect his feelings for her. They managed to see each other almost every weekend and even on some weekdays. Her freshman year at university passed quickly. By the end of May 2018, she returned to Brooklyn for the summer. During her break at home, Molly kept herself busy throughout the day. She worked at a local children's day camp at Green Regional Medical Center, and in the evenings, she participated in activities to prepare for her sophomore year. Molly also made time to go jogging almost every evening. She split her time between her mother's house and her boyfriend Dalton's house on the western edge of Brooklyn. Unlike university students, Dalton didn't have a summer vacation and worked most weekdays. His construction work is sometimes local and sometimes he works across the state. On July 18, 2018, Molly visited Dalton's house. Dalton lived there with his brother and their dogs. But both of them worked away from home. Dalton was working on a project on Highway 61 near Oak. Molly agreed to take care of the dogs and stay at Dalton's house to work and study. It was a hot day, so Molly stayed inside with her dogs and her laptop, hoping for a cooler temperature. The day seemed normal. She spent her free time chatting with her boyfriend on the phone, looking for something to eat, or engaging in conversations on Twitter. As the sun set, the weather cooled down. This is a good time for Molly to go for a run. Around 7:30 p.m., she left her laptop open, sent Dalton a selfie, put on her workout clothes, and headed to the cornfield for her workout. However, Molly never returned. She was missing that night. Dalton, who had not heard from her that night, assumed she was just busy and had gone to bed. But the next morning, when Molly's messages remained unanswered, he began to worry. He contacted friends to ask if they had heard from Molly, but they had no idea where she was. All of her social media accounts are inactive. The panic really began when her boss called Dalton to find out why she had missed work. Molly was always on time for her job and had never missed a day before, so her absence was unusual. Dalton was worried and wondered what could have happened to her. Her silence made Dalton, her family and friends feel uneasy. By the end of the day, the police and the local community were mobilized to search for Molly. Missing posters were quickly plastered around the city and surrounding areas. Shortly after, Molly's father Rob flew from California to join the search efforts. In mid-July, Iowa was experiencing hot summer days, and the surrounding cornfields made visibility difficult. Police announced on television that the search for Molly is ongoing. While there are no new updates, the search continues. Molly, a 20-year-old University of Iowa student, went missing last Wednesday in Brooklyn. She was last seen by her neighbor jogging with her dogs, wearing shorts, a sports bra and sneakers. At the time, Molly's whereabouts were unknown. The only confirmed sighting was when a neighbor saw her running east of town that evening. Police had no further leads. As the weeks passed, the reward for information about Molly had increased significantly to nearly $400,000. They even created a website to encourage the public to share any information about Molly. Police also analyzed data from Molly's fitness tracker to determine her running route. Despite all the efforts, the investigation remained unsolved until mid-August. A person in northeast Brooklyn was reviewing surveillance footage when she noticed something unusual. Concerned, she reported her findings to the police, leading to a crucial discovery. The footage showed a 1951 Chevrolet with chrome side mirrors and handles. Initially, nothing unusual appeared, but the car returned and appeared on surveillance cameras multiple times. Then, at 8:07 p.m., the same Chevrolet was recorded again, this time speeding away. Based on the footage, the car, which was behaving erratically at the same time and place that Molly went missing, caught the attention of the police. They began searching for the car in the small town. They quickly located it. A day after reviewing the video of the black Chevrolet, deputy sheriffs spotted the vehicle on the road. Instead of stopping immediately, he followed the car until the driver stopped. The deputy sheriff approached the driver's window and identified him as John Bath. When asked about Molly's disappearance, John claimed he had no knowledge of her and was not involved. He was allowed to leave, but his freedom was short-lived. Just 2 days later, police officers visited John's workplace at a dairy farm and noticed he was now driving a different car, which belonged to his girlfriend. At this point, the police began to take notice of John, but they had no evidence that he was involved in Molly's disappearance. The police took John to the local police station for further questioning. Although John was not required to answer their questions, he chose to cooperate. The interrogation lasted several hours, and ultimately, John confessed. However, his real name was Christian Bahina Rivera, and he lived and worked in rural Polk County near Brooklyn. Originally from Mexico, he had entered the United States illegally at the age of 17. Because he could not work legally, he was not registered in any official system, including at his job on a farm near Brooklyn. During questioning, police asked Christian if he knew where Molly was, and he admitted that he had seen her the night she disappeared. He explained that he had noticed her before deciding to approach her. When he ran over to strike up a conversation, Molly did not respond. When he persisted, she took out her phone and warned him to leave or she would call the police. The next day, August 21st, After more than 10 hours of questioning, Christian agreed to lead the police to a remote area outside of Brooklyn. When the police arrived and got out of their car, they found Molly's body. She was lying under some corn stalks, wearing only a sports bra and socks. Christian confessed that when he confronted Molly and she threatened to call the police, he acted out of anger and ended up killing her, then hiding her body in a cornfield. Molly suffered between 7 and 12 stab wounds to the chest, ribs, neck, and skull, ultimately leading to her death. This tragic news has left Molly's family, friends, and acquaintances heartbroken. As they learned more about the circumstances of Molly's death, their grief turned to anger. On August 22, Christian was charged with first-degree murder. Concerns that he might flee led to his bail being raised from $1 million to $5 million. As the investigation into Molly's disappearance turns into a murder case, developments related to her case continue to surface both in public and in the media. The following month, Christian denied any involvement in the case, despite initially confessing to Molly's murder. He later recanted his confession. Police made significant progress in the case. They searched Christian's black Chevrolet and discovered blood in both the trunk and on the rims. Testing revealed that the blood belonged to Molly, indicating that she had been in Christian's trunk that night. A series of bureaucratic delays postponed the court case. The public trial of Christian was delayed for several months and moved to another county for safety reasons. In August 2019, Christian's defense team submitted a 20-page motion arguing that his confession should not be used as evidence. They claimed he was not properly informed of his Miranda rights because of his foreign nationality. This means that although he admitted to killing Molly, he did not receive a warning that anything he said could be used against him in court. Therefore, his confession could not be used as evidence. In addition, the judge postponed Christian's trial until 2020 to allow more time to review the case. In 2020, the trial was postponed again. On May 17, 2021, Christian Bahena Rivera's trial finally began. His defense team argued that the police had violated his rights before charging him with murder. They claimed that the police had used illegal interrogation methods to force Christian to confess. When this approach failed, the defense attempted to blame Molly's boyfriend, Dalton, claiming that he had cheated on her 3 years earlier and then killed her. However, Dalton had a solid alibi for the time of Molly's disappearance. Although he was absent from work for nearly 2 hours, several co-workers were able to confirm his whereabouts during that time, and it was clear that he loved Molly very much. Christian eventually testified, but he changed his story. He claimed that 2 armed men came to his house, forced him to drive them until they found Molly, then killed her and forced him to drive to a cornfield, threatening his son's life if he revealed what had happened. Christian's confession, the surveillance footage, Molly's blood found in the trunk of his car, and his own incredible story all pointed clearly to his guilt. On Friday, May 28, Christian Bahena Rivera was convicted of murdering Molly Tibbetts. After just 7 hours of jury deliberation, Christian was found guilty of first-degree murder. He was sentenced to life in prison. After the verdict, Christian's girlfriend, who had been raising their son Will, disappeared from Brooklyn, leaving his son on the farm without a family. With nowhere else to go, Will was eventually adopted by Molly's mother, Laura. This adoption allowed Will to continue his education and move toward a brighter future. Her parents consistently chose love over hate, which helps explain Molly's positive character. The support didn't end there. Hundreds of people came together at the University of Iowa to celebrate Molly's memory.